Call to order the County of Placer Board of Supervisors meeting Friday, August 17, 2012 at 9:01 a.m. We will begin this morning with the flag salute led by Supervisor Euler.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Euler. All right, at this time we will have the statement of meeting procedures read by our clerk of the board, Ann Holman.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Friday, August 17th, 2012. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you, Ann. Now is the time for public comment. Anyone may address the board on items not on this agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, since time allocated for public comment is 15 minutes. If we can't take all public comment within the 15-minute time limit, we will take it up again at the end of the regular session. And please understand that the board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, all, and hello. We haven't met formally yet, but I look forward to meeting with you, our new CEO. So on behalf of the board and volunteers, I'm sorry. I'm Angela Tati with Placer Arts.
Thank you.
A resident of Auburn. And our organization has served Placer County since 1983. Next year is our 30th service anniversary year. And we just wanted to say thank you for your longstanding partnership. As you well know, but the public may not, we serve the State Arts Council as the local partner designated by the Board of Supervisors each year. And last year we received the second highest ranking in the state, right behind San Francisco Arts Commission. So we're very excited to continue our work and continue our partnership with the County of Placer, and we wanted to say thank you. And Stephen Gleese, our board chair, would be here this morning, but he's out on new child care leave and caring for his dad. So he sends his regards as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Any other public comment at this time? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Supervisor committee reports. Anything to report since yesterday? All right, we will move then to our 9 o'clock timed item. This is the fiscal year 2012-13 county budget. We'll be starting with day 2. Graham Knaus.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you.
Well, this morning we will go through the remaining department presentations. You heard from many departments yesterday, and we did the broad fiscal overview related to the county. Once we complete the this morning's department presentations, we will then transition to an update of the 5-year budget model, which does reflect the final budget recommendations from our office. So we've incorporated those into the 5-year model, those that we are aware of prior to any further direction from the board. We'll also work through open issues, some from yesterday, and any that may arise this morning, and then move towards formal direction from your board related to putting together the final budget. With that, I actually would, unless there are questions of the board, I would transition to the department presentations, and we will begin with the Health and Human Services System, starting with the Health and Human Services Department, and Brian Hacker will kick that off from the CEO's office.
Excellent. Thank you, Graham.
Good morning, Brian Hacker, County Executive Office. Here to introduce the Health and Human Services Department. You'll see this budget is a significant portion of the county's operating budget, and that's reflective of the broad array of services that this department provides to county residents. Looking at year-over-year changes to budget from fiscal year 11-12 to our recommended budget for 12-13, the difference is largely the result of leveraging $7 million in additional federal funding related to the Medicaid Waiver Demonstration Program approved by your board on July 24th. I think it's also important to point out here, though, the general fund support for this department actually decreases $1.2 million in recognition of increased HHS realignment revenue. Position counts were actually overstated by a few here. The department's operating budget, actually their position counts are 643. I had included the IHSS, which is obviously a different budget than the county's operating budget. You heard yesterday on positions, we are consolidating some positions over with the IT MIS. So we're losing positions from HHS, transferring them over to the IT Admin Services Department. And separately, we're also adding some funded positions from the federal funding related to the Medicaid Waiver Demonstration Program. So turning to slide 2 then, I think it's just important once again to point out that the department continues to maximize its federal and state funding in order to provide enhanced services to our eligible Placer County residents. And if you have no questions on the numbers, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Burton to present his department and programs.
Thank you, Brian. I see no questions, so Dr. Burton.
Good morning, Board. Dr. Richard Burton, the Director of Health and Human Services and the County Health Officer. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity this morning to share some of the work that Health and Human Services is able to do at your direction. We're pleased to have the opportunity to follow the Board's direction and fully support the budget as submitted in the final budget. Have no further requests today. I really appreciate the consistent, all throughout the year, collaborative and flexible cooperation we have with all county departments and the county exec's office as we work through not only the budget development for this process, but frankly we rebudget throughout the year and adapt to whatever the funding stream changes occur at the state and federal level. I'm fortunate today to have my senior leadership team here with me. We have Dr. Jim Ganley, the Assistant Director for the department, Maureen Bauman, Director of Adult System of Care, Richard Connect, Director of Children's System of Care, Ken Stewart, our Interim Director of Environmental Health, Dr. Mark Starr, Director of Community Health Clinics and Animal Services, and Cheryl Davis, our Director of Human Services. Each of them will have some brief comments to share about their division's work as soon as I conclude my opening thoughts. While every year has challenges, it's remarkable that in the last year, Health and Human Services served more residents, provided a higher level of service, did it in a way that achieved better outcomes than we've ever achieved before, and all that while returning a larger fund balance to the general fund at the end of the year than the department has ever returned before. The way that that is accomplished is through taking an entrepreneurial approach toward the breadth of the services that we're involved with. We look at the best that the private and public sector has to offer. We reevaluate constantly how we do what we do, and we make sure that we adapt and use those best practices on a daily basis. Through those adopting the entrepreneurial approach, it's remarkable that we have about 45% of our expenditures in our department are either contracted out to private and nonprofit partners or direct benefits that go to the residents directly. That represents about 250 contracts that we have with nonprofit and private organizations throughout the community, and this increases year after year. Through this approach, we've been able to maximize and leverage, as Brian mentioned and Graham mentioned, state and federal dollars. And in the last year, for every county general fund dollar that was invested within the department, we were able to draw down approximately $6 of state and federal funding. One example of that was mentioned, and we appreciate the board's support at the recent Tahoe meeting when they approved the new arrangement we have to provide indigent health care. Through this arrangement, on an annual basis, we'll be able to access now a new $7 million of federal money that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to access. Every single division in Health and Human Services is recognized across the state and sometimes across the nation for the outstanding work that they do. All of our directors in each division are recognized among the leaders in their field. But the people that make the biggest difference day in and day out on accomplishing the services and helping the residents that come to us for their assistance are the over 600 employees that Brian mentioned in the earlier presentation. Each of those gifted employees are assisting residents in unique ways that they can find those services nowhere else in the community. Some of those employees are involved in helping vulnerable adults remain safe and secure and thriving in their homes. Some help people with chronic mental illness be able to manage their condition and live independently within the community. Other employees help children and family deal with neglect or abuse, oftentimes helping those children heal at times when the children never thought there would be an escape from the trauma that they were experiencing. We have employees that help businesses achieve their business plans and provide safe environments for their employees and safe products for the residents of Placer County to consume. We have employees that help provide health care. As I mentioned, we provide about 35,000 health visits a year for different residents within Placer County. And those are visits that otherwise those residents would not have access to care throughout the county. And lastly, we have employees that help individuals gain employment when they find themselves unemployed. And we help individuals put food on the table when they otherwise wouldn't have it at the end of the day. Certainly the work that these employees do on a day in and day out basis is remarkable. And they're the most phenomenal employees I've ever had the privilege to work with. But what I find most impressive each day as we do our work is the commitment that our residents and businesses have in Placer County to be self-sufficient and independent. As good as our employees are, I've never met a resident or a business that came to work with us because they had other options and they just chose to spend time with us. They come to us because we have either unique expertise or they're at a season in their life where they don't have access to the kind of services that we provide anywhere else in the community. Businesses seek to work with us because we have subject expertise that will help them accomplish their business goals. Individuals frequently come to us because they're ill, they're hungry, they're homeless, they have chronic conditions that they don't know how to manage. They're unemployed and they don't know where else to turn. And when they're in those seasons, coming to us for assistance is probably the first time they've ever asked for public assistance. And they find this probably the most humbling experience that they've ever experienced in their life. And yet our compassionate and gifted employees help shepherd them through that process, access the services they're eligible for, and put them on the road back to the self-sufficiency that they want. It's the courage and dedication of the businesses and individuals that we serve as they press on through unprecedented challenges in their lives, individual lives and their business lives, that drive Health and Human Services to consistently and constantly reevaluate what we do and how we do it and make sure that we're doing it the best that we can. Unless you had any questions for me at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our directors for them to share a little more detail on each of their divisions, and then I'll come back afterwards. Any questions?
I see no questions, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll start with Maureen Bauman and Adult System of Care.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson and members of the boards. The Adult System of Care successfully partners with agencies in Placer County to assist adults and older adults to achieve their optimal level of self-sufficiency and independence by providing us full spectrum of behavioral, health, and social services to more than 14,000 Placer County adults each year. Safety of these adults and our community is a high priority, and over 3,400 adults are responded to in urgent situations to assure their safety and the safety of our community. We assess them to assure that they are not in danger, that they're not a danger to somebody else, as well as investigating allegations of abuse and neglect. We use a variety of tools to respond to these situations, including hospitalizations, case management, and the conservatorship process as necessary. On a different note, state funding has provided a really new level of services over the last number of years in Placer County for persons with mental illness so that people, in partnership with their providers, receive the most intensive level of outpatient services. This can include things like getting a safe place to live, a job, physical health care, clothing, food, or treatment. It's really a whatever it takes approach to help people on their path to recovery and wellness, and is provided by a team 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Placer County Turning Point, a contract agency, provides most of these services for Placer residents, and we are really celebrating their outstanding results with significant reductions in days hospitalized, days incarcerated, and days homeless. In fact, individuals reduced the number of days that they were incarcerated by 90% in the last year. In addition, with this program, we have a county outreach and engagement worker who is able to respond to requests from the community, law enforcement, county departments, when there is a person out there in the community that we're worried about, that somebody thinks maybe they have a mental illness and they're not really able to seek their own services, and that worker is able to respond and engage people in the community. Our criminal justice partnership is excellent. We just have an excellent collaborative relationship with all the criminal justice partners in Placer County and are able to provide a really coordinated approach to individuals with assessments and services using contracted treatment and community resources. AB 109 funds have put in place services and supports including individual therapy, psychiatric care, outpatient services, residential treatment, primary care, employment assistance, and transitional housing. The adult system of care uses a treatment matching approach to assure that each individual that law enforcement asks us to serve, that criminal justice agencies, receives the exact appropriate level of care, clinical level of care for their needs. And we do this by assessing their needs, their readiness for change, and their motivation and engagement, level of engagement. I'm very excited to tell you that our in-custody treatment programs are going to be implemented next week, something that we have been looking forward to. We have 2 providers that are going to be going, one into the main jail, one into the barracks, and they're going to be implementing services that are specifically designed for the criminal justice population, and will be facilitating people to look at identifying their problems, reviewing their decision-making process, and really increasing their motivation for change. As Rich mentioned, contracting out is a high priority in this division as well as it is in the department, and we actively engage contracts with and put in place contract with community partners to really establish the most effective community continuum of care. The public-private partnership model is embraced by the adult system of care and really has proven to be most effective. It's extremely effective as well as cost-effective. So over 40% or $13 million of the adult system and care resources are put in place in purchasing of contracted services. I wanted to just highlight other partnerships, however, don't always require resources. And we are partnering with a variety of cities and faith-based organizations in a number of ways in Placer County. The most recent partnership, which was about a year in the making, is with the Mosaic Church in Rockland. We have put together a trained group of volunteers, they have put together a trained group of volunteers to establish a warm line for those persons that are receiving services and are in home support services. Many times these folks really don't have an ability to get out very much. And this new support service, which is being designed to be long-term sustainability, which is what the group was interested in putting in place, is going to provide a friendly check-in so that persons who are interested and can have a regular support call for somebody that is able to regularly respond to them and check in with them. So we are really excited to add this additional resource as a community resource that's going to really help a very vulnerable part of our population. So thank you for your time this morning, and with that, if there's no questions, I will turn it over to Richard Connect.
Actually, I see Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you, Maureen. The in-custody treatment program, is that part of AB 109?
It is.
And is that funded with state dollars, or does that come out of our?
It's AB 109 state funded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Richard Connect with the Children's System of Care. On behalf of our staff, I'd like to express my appreciation to you as a board. We're mindful of your great support, not only for children's programming directly with CSOC, but it seems like not a week goes by that one of my teammates doesn't grab me in the hall or stop by my office and say, hey, I saw Supervisor so-and-so at one of our events, and your visibility and leadership with our community partners is a priceless gift, and we appreciate it very much. I'd just like to highlight a few outcomes in the children's system of care. Through enhanced child protection and safety practices, We continue to see a multi-year reduction in the number of youth that require formal county intervention. Most of you are probably familiar with differential response, the alternative CPS intervention that our Family Resource Center partners deliver for us. We attribute this outcome to that great work along with another program in the county, Koinonia Family Services, that runs our Crisis Resolution Center in Loomis, effectively serving more than 100 youth each year, preventing access or need for formal government services or intervention. These are effective programs for us. Of those families that do require formal county intervention, some 450 of these families, via great community partnerships and intensive family finding and kinship care, are able to be reunified or kept intact within 6 months of their first contact with the county. We're thrilled that we don't have to spend long periods of time with youth in care, that they can get back to more normalized existence, and these are good outcomes for our youth. We're thrilled that nearly 85% of our young people in foster care avoid group home care. While group homes are often necessary for some of our youth, they're not the ideal places to grow up. And so we're thrilled that through effective in-home, in-community services, you may know these as wraparound programs. Again, nearly 85% of our youth are in permanent placement without group home care. Today, we're also thrilled to tell you that some 4,000 families, courtesy of the Mental Health Services Act, are able to manage sometimes significant mental health and emotional and behavioral challenges for their young people through prevention and early intervention in the community. Some of you have been to our campaign for community wellness meetings, where the adult and children's systems of care engage with community partners each month in a thoughtful, ongoing planning and implementation process. And again, today, some 4,000 families are served without any local dollars being spent for their care. I have a periodic opportunity to get firsthand exposure to the great outcomes that the children's system of care delivers. Just last week, I dropped off my personal vehicle for service at my local dealership, and of course they provide a shuttle service back to my office, and the young man driving the shuttle asked me what I did for work, and I told him I got the privilege of working with the children's system of care and HHS, and he got a big smile on his face, and he reported that some 16 years ago he'd spent about 45 days in our children's shelter, and that it was a life-changing opportunity for him and for his family, and it gave his father a little wake-up call and a chance to deal with a substance abuse issue and to get his life in order. And I said, well, your dad must be your hero. And he got tears in his eyes. He says, my dad is my hero, and my social workers were helpful in that process. And it was just very nice to see, again, the fact that our services are real for our families and our residents, and that they do make a difference. Appreciate, again, your support for the children's system of care, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
I see none. Richard, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ken Stewart. I'm Interim Director of Environmental Health, and I'm pleased to be here today and actually meet some of the board members I haven't met before. I think most of you realize environmental health is commonly defined as man's first line of defense against disease, and we don't really think about that, but it's truly a prevention program. It's a little scary because we're based on regulatory also, but we really look at delivering programs that concentrate on education and getting people to understand how looking at what we have to do as far as laws are to their advantage and how it helps them improve their business world. Our goal, obviously, is to ensure the health and safety environments of our residents and visitors that can live, work, and recreate in our county. This is done through our programs in consumer protection, hazardous materials management, solid waste management, land use, and a myriad of other programs. We just really cross a lot of lines. But throughout this look at what we do within the county, we also look at the fact that we have to work with industry. A couple of the keys we do in assisting local businesses, looking at cost-effective methods, self-monitoring, and trying to decrease the need for governmental oversight. Not always an easy thing to do, but we do try and do it. This is included through our often provided training for food service managers, for food service handlers, not required by law, but provided by services by trying to help the community. Every year we do at least one or two operators courses for pool and spa operators so that they could better understand not as much complying with the law, but how to operate the facilities they're responsible for. We just completed our first workshop with our newest program, the Body Arts Regulation Program, and it was very well accepted. It also came to us to say that we need more of these. And what that's doing is working directly with industry on how to develop the program so it's good for all of us. Finally, we do provide big programs, 24 7-hour incident response throughout our county to local businesses, fire, law enforcement, and Office of Emergency Services. This is one that we often step in. You see an emergency, particularly a fire or something. Once it's all under control, environmental health often is the one that becomes the recovery agency. Also want to mention that we have partnerships. We probably kind of reverse partnerships from a lot of things. By this I mean we have a contract with Nevada County where our geologist is able to go over and help them 2 or 3 days a month to solve some of their problems so they don't have to enter in a contract. We also contract with El Dorado County. We're the local enforcement agency for solid waste for El Dorado County, which is a little bit unusual also. And then our partnership understanding with Nevada County also goes in emergency response. They only have one staff basically in Truckee. So when they have problems, particularly up on Donner Summit or something, that our staff can get there, will help out until Nevada County can get there. So it's a definite partnership. I think as everybody gets to know environmental health, people say, well, gee, I didn't realize you were involved in that. And so we really look at trying to be programs that can give answers, can give guidance, and actually rely on developing health and stuff through that direction. If there are any questions, that's my brief comments. I'll be glad to answer questions.
Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you, Ken. I know you're involved in all kinds of aspects, and the one that just opened up my eyes just now was you called it body arts. We're talking about tattoo parlors, is that correct?
Yes.
And how many, I know there's a lot of them that seem to be springing up all over, but how much time does your staff devote to overseeing tattoos?
Well, I'll actually be doing a formal presentation Tuesday with the board on this, but right now we have anticipated about 38 facilities and some 80 practitioners. Through this morning, we have received permit applications from 54. That is primarily, and we're just really starting to open them. That is primarily throughout the county, although there's only a few facilities up in the Tahoe Basin. Most of them are in the more urban areas in Roseville and Rockland and so forth. So we're anticipating probably 40, 45 facilities, and probably, we know of 80 practitioners. It's probably going to be higher.
Wow. That's an eye-opener.
And just to clarify, Donner Summit, a lot of it at least is in Placer County, or I wouldn't be able to sit here, so. But
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. And that's why,
just in case there was any question about where I lived.
No, I shouldn't have. Yeah, no, there's just times we don't necessarily look at county lines if it comes to a quick response. And,
Absolutely, at the entire east.
getting the
kind of-
job done and getting 80 opened again.
Yeah.
With that, then, I want to turn the program over to Dr. Mark Starr.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken. I'm Mark Starr, Director of Community Health Clinics and Animal Services. I wasn't aware about the tattoo parlors in Rockland, but I'm going to have to go check them out tonight.
And body piercing, by the
And-
way, too,
yeah.
so.
Yes.
Holmes can refer you to all the good ones.
I'm going to get some of those deals in my earlobes. So I'll start off with some of the few accomplishments in our division as a whole, but start off with community clinics. You heard Dr. Burton mention that we offer about 35,000 total visits through our medical clinics each year. And those include a full scope of services ranging from things such as just straight immunizations, family planning, to full primary care, and even sometimes casting broken bones. We work closely with the hospitals and specialists in our community to make sure there's a full continuum of care that's coordinated for our patients. And we integrate our mental health and physical health services as much as possible in the primary care setting for those patients that will work for, so they can all have all their needs met under one roof. And this has really been a model in the state, and we had great assistance from Maureen Shop in putting that together. And our colleagues in Human Services helped over 25,000 eligible residents to access coordinated care, whether it's through our clinics or through providers in the community through some of the eligibility programs. And of course, Dr. Burton also mentioned the new Medicaid expansion program that you all approved at the Tahoe meeting. That went live on August 1st, and so we're enrolling patients and starting to be able to provide more services to more people without additional county expenditures by leveraging the federal funding for that program. In community health, we have a wide variety of programs. Some of these serve the population as a whole, not just individual services, and these include various health education and disease prevention programs. Some examples include our tobacco control program, our substance abuse prevention program, and others like that. The substance abuse prevention program, or SAP as we love to call it, partners with the community in many ways to reduce substance abuse, and especially focusing on youth. And in this past year, held numerous community forums with about 300 attendees on average at each one. Our communicable disease program, of course, is kind of the core of public health and is always ready to protect our residents from communicable disease hazards on a daily basis. And we often work with Ken's shop on some of the challenges there, whether it's foodborne outbreaks or other problems. We also have an emergency preparedness program that's ready to assist with health needs during any kind of emergency or disaster. You may recall our response to pertussis, or whooping cough, in 2010 was a statewide epidemic. And subsequent to that, a state law was passed that required immunization of kids entering school in 7th to 12th grade. So in 2011, we collaborated closely with the schools, with healthcare providers, volunteer nurses, and others to make sure that immunizations were delivered as much as possible to those kids, resulting in about 95% of that age group being immunized before school entry in last fall. And some of our community health programs do provide direct services to individuals, and about over 30,000 residents benefited from this last year. These include supplemental food programs, immunizations in the community, birth and death certificates, over 5,000 tests done in our public health lab, home visits, and some unique services for children through our Children's Medical Services program. And some of that is services for foster kids that we coordinate with Richard Connect's shop in order to accomplish that. WIC alone provided nutrition, education, and healthy meals to over 9,000 families with food that comes from local sources last year. This leads to healthier infants and improved readiness for school. On the animal services side, we responded to over 7,000 calls for assistance from county residents last year and improved the lives of over 15,000 animals. We do this through service calls by our animal control officers, through our sheltering of animals, of course, licensing, and a number of other services. We had about 12,000 visitors to our 2 shelters, and over 2,500 pets were reunited with their owners or placed in loving homes. We can continue to be unusual among government-run shelters by successfully placing every adoptable animal that comes into our facility and placing them into a stable and caring home. For more than 7 years, our staff, our considerable volunteer support, and our community partners have made this accomplishment possible. To close, I really want to acknowledge and compliment the remarkable staff of our entire division that have achieved these and other accomplishments throughout the year in the face of difficult times and economic challenges. These have increased the demand for our services in recent years, of course, and I commend our staff for meeting the challenge. I'm certainly open to questions, and otherwise we'll pass to Cheryl Davis.
Dr. Starr, I did have one question. I'm sorry, Supervisor Euler.
Not a question, just a success story. Back in July, I believe it was. No, June. My family and I went up and met a rambunctious little black lab named Gabby, who was suffering from some kind of a skin condition and had lost most of her hair, but she had a great disposition, and we took her home, and today she is not only fully recovered and has her hair all back, but when we're done here, I drive her down to her bird dog training down in the Galt area, and she's coming along great. So she's become a part of our family. We love her to death, and we enjoyed the experience working with your folks up there in making her a part of our family.
Thanks much. It's one of those loving, caring homes that nice to have a specific example and an example of a dog with medical needs that we are able to place them and rather than euthanize them. It's really
Our
great.
Chihuahua wasn't exactly thrilled.
Yeah, I bet.
He's gotten used to the idea. He's still not thrilled, but he's gotten used to the idea.
Well, if your lab's like my lab, the Chihuahua probably runs the house. But
That's precisely
Yeah.
the case, yes.
Supervisor Holmes.
Well, I have my own animal control success story as well. It was sometime in June. I went home in the afternoon, and my driveway was blocked. And there was 2 cars blocking my driveway, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went up to the lady there that the sticker on the back of her car said, "Impeach everybody." Well, anyhow, evidently this lady's lost her llama, so there was a loose llama in my yard. And she was in tears because nobody understood about this poor llama's dilemma. Anyhow, I told her, well, let me call animal control for you since I'm the Placer County Supervisor. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So they came and they got the llama, and then I said, you're not going to impeach me, are you? So anyhow, it was they came out right away. And you've got a team that knows how to get llamas out of my yard.
before they spit on you, right? Yeah. Thanks.
So, Dr. Starr, I did want to ask, as it relates to this year's coming budget, hopefully we're moving forward to building a new animal shelter in Auburn. How is that process proceeding from your perspective?
It's proceeding very well. We've had several meetings with the, really more like workshops with the architect and the team they've assembled, which includes folks from the UC Davis Shelter Medicine Program. So we're not only designing a new shelter, but we're doing it in a way that maximizes the flow of animals through the facility, minimizing the length of stay for animals as much as possible. A lot of improvements in operations are going to be a result of the structure as well, and of course we're expecting a beautiful new shelter. Facility Services, I think, will be coming back to you not too distant future with a proposal to go out for the design-build contractor.
Excellent. That's fantastic.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah, it's great because the work you do will be all that much better when you have a new facility to do it out of. So thank you. Any other questions? Kirk, your light's still on? It's okay? All right, we'll move to Cheryl.
Good morning, Chair, Montgomery, members of the board. Closing out the division presentations, it's my job to stick the dismount in the spirit of the I'm Cheryl Davis from your Human Services Division. As the demand for assistance has grown exponentially over the past several years, your Human Services staff have risen to the occasion to help many Placer County residents in need, many of whom never thought in their wildest dreams they'd ever have to turn to us for help. On any given day, we help over 42,000 Placer County adults and children have a place to sleep tonight, have food on their table, and get needed medical assistance. That is a 12% increase over just last year. Right today, we are serving 1 out of every 9 Placer County residents and helping them through some very difficult times. Despite a weak job market, we helped 784 parents back to work, and with your approval of our subsidized wage program and working in partnership with your Business Advantage Network, or BAN as we know it, we've partnered with 75 local businesses and placed 120 qualified job seekers with them, folks trying to get back on their feet in what I call win-win situation. Folks go back to work, and we help the employers with some subsidies for the wages, and BAN goes forward and helps them apply for tax credits for which they may be eligible. A parent goes back to work, and a business remains viable during some difficult times. Your HUD-recognized high-performing housing authority helps 282 individuals, seniors, veterans, disabled persons, and families afford to keep their housing. How we've kept pace with the demand is by turning to some of the best practices in private industry and bringing them into public assistance services. Again, with your go-ahead, we implemented a service center model on August 22nd last year. Our 1-year anniversary is next Wednesday. We maximized technology, we streamlined processes, we started up a call center, and undid a 75-year-old case-based approach to our work and replaced it with task-based, an efficient and effective task-based approach. And we did that without sacrificing public service. In fact, we improved it. In just 1 year, your Human Services call center has bested industry call center standards. If you were to call for San Francisco Giant tickets, your insurance industry, your utility company, Zappos, the industry standard is that 80% of the calls are answered within 60 seconds. Your Human Services service center, or call center through June answered 107,000 calls in under 48 seconds. So we bested industry standards. With your go-ahead, we were the 15th call center in the state to go live. There's 21 now. The state of California is looking at a statewide call center and asked for presentations from Kaiser, from a private sector business, and counties to come before a statewide board to talk about performance measures. We turned in our performance measures. Of the 21 counties, many were not meeting, let alone besting industry standards, so only the 3 best were asked to present. So I received a call saying, do you mind if Placer's information is presented to this statewide board? And I was like, no, I was very proud. When the presentation was given to me, Placer County was number 1 at 48 seconds. The second one was 68 seconds. The third best was 2 minutes. Between number 3 and number 21, the time to answer the phone is between 2 minutes and 8 minutes. Your Human Services call center is the best performing one in the state right now, and we intend to keep that. That's standing. Knowing the demographics of the folks, the residents of Placer County, as you know, Placer County ranks number 1 in social and economic factors. We have relatively, even though it's still high, relatively lower unemployment rate than many other counties. But when the recession hit, because so many of our residents had been working, they qualified for unemployment benefits. Those benefits barely helped them keep their homes, pay their utilities, so they had to turn to us for food assistance so that they could put meals on the table for their children. We've had a 300% increase in our CalFresh applications, and 90% of those are families that are also receiving unemployment benefits. Because the demand was so high and the situation was so desperate, we are the only county that offers same-day processing of food assistance benefits to our families that are in need. We have found that we haven't reached out as well to our seniors and some of our working families. So this past year, we've been targeting our seniors, working with Seniors First, going to senior housing complexes, going to local food closets. Because what we found is that our seniors were dead on determined not to come to a welfare office. So we went to them. And we have increased those eligible folks coming into, or at least receiving benefits because we're going to them. Despite what we see as the high social and economic factors of Placer County, we still have many families in need. We went to Elijah's Jar and Forest Hill, the food closet there, and came across a couple in their early 60s. The man, the husband, had to stop working last year because of some illnesses, and his wife had never worked. They were living on $503 a month, waiting until they were old enough for Social Security. They were selling off their personal possessions to make it, and all their groceries for 1 year were coming from Elijah's Jar. They had not been able to go to a grocery store shopping for almost a year. Our staff, our outreach staff, processed their CalFresh application. They were eligible, and they were so excited for the first time in 13 months to be able to go to Safeway or wherever they went for food shopping. Our new business processes have improved our public service rating. We are 15 percentage points higher than pre-service center. When you see that our overall handling is 93% satisfaction and 96% for courteous staff. We were in the 80s prior to going to our service center. We receive many compliments and letters, more so than I've ever experienced in my entire public service career. Supervisor Holmes received one from a constituent and graciously came to one of our meetings to share that with the staff who was receiving the compliments. These are other letters, and as I said, I have never in 25 years of public service seen so many compliments for a staff. I wanted to share just two quick ones with you. to kind of show you what our residents are going through and how your human services staff are helping. This one came from a woman who lives in Rockland. She said, I recently applied for medical benefits from Placer County Health and Human Services Department. I unfortunately lost my job of almost 20 years and as well my health benefits. I've always been a self-sufficient woman, so it was very difficult to ask for help. I've heard sad and demeaning stories how people can be treated and processed quickly when asking for public assistance, so I felt very anxious and thought it might be an embarrassing experience. I was so impressed with Miss Krebs. Carly Krebs is one of our staff at our Rockland office. I was so impressed with Miss Krebs' professionalism, efficiency, and truly caring assistance. The way she treated me did not diminish my dignity at all. She is truly an employee who exceeded my expectations. I explained that recent medical tests were indicative of a potentially terminal condition. She was sincerely concerned and even followed up via telephone to make sure I was certain about decisions I had made regarding my paperwork. There's different Medi-Cal programs depending on your diagnosis. Ms. Krebs is an excellent representation of the face of Placer County Health and Human Services. If everyone did their jobs as well as she did, I believe we'd have more efficient and productive public services. And this is my favorite, because it's about our whole office, and it's actually about our whole office down in Rockland, which serves Supervisor Euler's, Duran's, and Wygant's districts. The Placer County Human Services Office is by far, from any experience, very helpful, the most courteous, most professional, most informative, and the most dedicated to their job. I 100% believe that this office absolutely supersedes any office in the state of California, and they actually are right. This office should be publicly recognized for their hard work, dedication, and their efforts to go above and beyond to help the residents of their community. Thank you, Placer County, for being there for people in their times of need. Sincerely, Harold. And that resident lives in Roseville. So just to sum up, these difficult economic times have affected Placer County residents, more Placer County residents than ever before. And your human services staff is quickly, efficiently, and effectively, and with care and compassion, serving those who are turning to us in their time of need.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Any questions from the board for anyone who's been in front of us this morning? Dr. Burton.
Great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to come this morning. I think Cheryl stuck it with a 10.0, I think, and those kind of Olympian efforts go on day in and day out throughout the department, and I appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge Rebecca Millat, leads our fiscal management team. You heard about the actual programs and services going out to the residents. If we didn't have the technical expertise we have in admin and fiscal, we wouldn't be able to accomplish all those things you just heard about. So, again, thank you this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we're complete.
I see no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Brian, are you going to come back and lead us into child support services? Okay.
Hello again. Now introducing child support services. This $6 million budget is fully funded by state and federal revenues with no general fund net county cost. Year-over-year differences, we see that funded positions are decreased by 2. That was in the proposed budget. That's reflective of how the department aligns its expenditures with those federal and state revenues. A recommended final budget adjustment is after the state enacted budget action, the funding is reduced by $121,000, and once again, the department made some cost-cutting measures to align with that. So on to slide 2. The department continues to maximize its use of technology and its program efficiencies to continue to meet or exceed state program goals. Those are really just a few quick points I'd like to point out and then hand over to Troy unless you have questions.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Bueller.
Yeah, if I could, just quickly state the obvious. My wife reports directly to Mr. Held. Before we get into this, I'm just going to ask County Council if there's any problem with me participating in this conversation.
No problem in this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Troy Held. I'm your Director of Child Support Services. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today about our budget and about our program and all of the good work that we do. In addition, I want to thank you for making August Child Support Awareness Month through resolution a few weeks back. It's an annual opportunity to share with the public and our customers and remind them about child support in California. I also want to mention for Supervisor Montgomery that we now have a full-time staff member back in our Tahoe office.
I heard that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Since we are a general fund department of the county, we don't actually receive any general fund money. What we do receive is 66% of our money comes from the federal government and 34% from the state. And so what we have is from the state governor's budget this year, 3 areas in which they made some adjustments. One is to reduce the child support automation system funding, which doesn't affect us directly other than the statewide program won't operate as well as it should. It'll operate as designed currently, but no additional automation changes will be made to it. Secondly, they suspended the county share of collections, which is where money is expended by the county and then collected back. They're going to be holding that. They also decided to reduce funding for the local child support agencies, which that's what they call the departments. And that was a sum of $14.7 million statewide. They came up with a calculation that averaged between 1% to 2.4%. And we fit into the formula at 2%, therefore losing $121,162. So for a long time we had a static budget, and then we would have a reduction and a reduction, then a static budget, and then here we are again with a reduction. But with that, I'm proud to say that we continue to actually do better, even though we've had reductions, we've had staffing reductions. Our work product is better today than ever before. I've added realignment to the slide, and I want to talk about it briefly, and that's Phase 2 realignment. And last year I came before this body and I said that we were mentioned, the Department, Child Support Services was mentioned in the governor's realignment package, but in Phase 2. And Phase 1 has been a problem, and a lot of things that people had to deal with in Phase 2 kind of just went away. But I've been notified recently by our statewide association that there's been some resuming some talks in that area, and so I wanted to bring that to this board. I want to remind you that I sit on a statewide committee as a chair for our state association in that regard, and if information does come to pass, I will certainly bring it to the CEO's office and, if necessary, back to this body. When I was appointed by this board in 2007, I had many goals, but one of the goals I had was to provide an annual report to this board on this day. And we've had a lot of other issues over that time and haven't been able to get to it until this year. So I want to present those documents to you now. What that document entails is the accomplishments of our department over the year, our goals for the next, our performance statistics, details on what the department has accomplished in 2011-12 and what we are working on for 2012-13. It gives you a flavor of the everyday life of what we're trying to accomplish, our mission, and to move forward with the direction that this board provides. I want to thank you for the time that you've given for me to talk with you. I want to thank you especially for letting me be your Director of Child Support Services. I'm honored to have the position, and I want to thank the staff, our wonderful staff who make our goals, our accomplishments, and do so much with so little times are tough, but they accomplish more today than they ever have, and I'm very proud of them for that. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I don't see any questions, but I really did want to take this opportunity to thank you. I have had constituents who have had some interactions through child support services, and I would say largely most of them were positive. There's always the exception. But we also don't see enough of you since you moved, since you relocated. But thank you for all you do, and thank you for the report. This is going to be very helpful to us, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I see no other questions, so you're off the hook.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right, we'll move on to Veteran Services.
So moving now on to Veteran Services. The level of general fund support is maintained for this budget. It continues to fund 4 positions. Moving on to slide 2, really going past the numbers quickly, I think with this small department, it's an understatement to say that this is a high-performing unit. The state has recognized this department as one of the top-performing counties in regards to monetary awards to our residents, our veterans, our deserving veterans, and that's reflective of the leadership we see here with Rick Buckman. So I'll hand it over to Rick.
Good morning. I'm Rick Buckman, soon-to-be retired Veteran Service Officer. This is the same budget that I basically had for the last 5 years. Even the pictures on the slide is the same.
And yet you've become more handsome. How is that?
The net county cost is decreased by 3%, and that's not because the expenses have gone down. It's because the revenue has increased and taken up all of the increases over the last 5 years. And our revenue is based on work production. The more work we do, the more money we get. So that obviously shows that we do some work. This year, in February, I had my client services program specialist, which would be 1/4 of the department, went on extended sick leave and finally retired, and we finally filled that position on Monday. I had a new guy that started for us. I was really lucky because the person that I hired came from the VA Pension Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so he even knows more than I do about pension. I don't like to tell him that, but and that's a big part of our workload is pension. We do a lot of pension for elderly World War II Korean veterans who are in assisted living and nursing homes and in-home care support services. After he left Milwaukee, he went to Reno and was at the VA regional office in Reno for a couple of years and worked on the compensation side, which is the side that we do for returning veterans who are injured in war, who have service-connected disabilities. So he has a breadth of experience that I wouldn't believe that I would have found. And so I'm trying to get him trained before I retire, and I really think that he's going to help the department. The state has changed the way that they allocate money. There's $2.6 million that's divided between all of the counties, and it's based on work and results of the work. They pretty much, since the subvention program started, haven't changed. They haven't messed with that thing because it seems like when you try to tinker with that, it may help the large counties, but it takes money away from the smaller and the medium counties. So we've kind of gotten used to the way they do that. The state decided that they wanted to kind of spur more compensation claims. So they decided that they're going to award, if you're successful when you file a claim, you get a workload unit. So they're going to take and give you 2 workload units for that. And so the success rate is going to double of what we were getting right now. And they've taken away fee waivers. We have a fee waiver program for disabled veterans' children going to one of the colleges, junior college, state college, university. They don't pay tuition. And so we've gotten in the past 2 workload units for doing that. So they've taken that, reduced that to 1. I do 310 fee waivers a year. Awards, I do more than most counties in the state of California. So it's going to increase the revenue that we get. It's really going to help Placer County because we do so many awards. The bad part is the smaller counties are really going to feel it because they need the money just as much as anybody else, but they don't do many awards. So I don't know how that's going to affect statewide. San Diego County, when they did the fee waivers, set up a work studies in all of the universities and colleges and state colleges that they have down there, which is quite a few of them, and they do like 10,000 fee waivers a year. They don't do any comp claims. They don't get many awards. So San Diego County is going to really feel it, and we're going to get some of the benefits from it. So even though it's going to change, I think it's going to increase the amount of revenue that we get from the state. Right now, we get the 5th highest amount of revenue of any county in the state of California. The only ones that beat us are the large ones, LA, San Diego, Riverside, and one of those other big counties down there. If you could go to the next slide, whoever's doing that. This shows the change in number of claims that we filed. As you can see, those have decreased, and that's because I've had one less person for the last 6 months. 5 months of the year. So he did a lot of claims with homeless veterans, referrals from the Medi-Cal system, and that. So with only 2 people doing claims instead of 3, of course, my numbers decreased a little bit. The number of awards also decreased for the same reason. The value of the awards, as it has for the past 5 years, increased by almost $1 million, and we're still get more awards for veterans, put more money in the pocket of veterans than any county in the state of California. For the last 4 years, I think we've had the most of any of them. And as you can see on the bottom half, that's the revenue. My subvention is increased from $48,000 to $107,000. That's because of the work that we do. That's based on work and success by awards to veterans. Medi-Cal cost avoidance pretty much stays the same. That's based on welfare referrals from HHS. We do claims. We get credit for it. The VSOF is the license plate fund. You'll see veterans' license plates on the road. Every time somebody buys a license plate, somebody renews their license plate, $28 comes to counties. It's based on your net county cost. So we're decreasing our net county cost, so our license plate fund goes down a little bit because we're not getting as much. And the state this year, in an attempt to increase that pot of money, the old license plates on the bottom said veteran. Then you put a plate around it, you couldn't see veteran, but they decided that, anybody can buy a vet plate. So we changed it. Now it says supporting veterans. So maybe non-veterans wouldn't feel so bad about buying a license plate that says veteran on it. Now it says honoring veterans. And it's still, you put a license plate cover on it, and it covers that up. So we're hoping that'll stimulate license plate sales, more money will come in. It's an unlimited pot. The more license plate we sell, the more money's in the pot to separate. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I just wanted to thank you for the last 7 years, all the support that I've gotten from the board. The way the department is set up is just been easy for me to do what I do. And I've just had a really pleasant experience in the last 7 years, and appreciate all the support from you.
Supervisor Holmes.
Rick, we're going to miss you around here. I just want to thank you for the tremendous job you've done for our veterans in Placer County over the last 7 years. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and whenever I call your office for information, you're very responsive. So it sounds like you've got a good guy in place to maybe...
Yes. The problem we're having with finding a replacement is the applications we're getting don't have many qualified people, and I've kind of encouraged him that he might want to apply.
Okay.
So I think he might do that this weekend. So.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Supervisor Duran.
Yes, I also concur with Supervisor Holmes. I just wanted to thank you for your service and what you've done for veterans. Coming from a large family of veterans that includes both my parents, my mother and father, and numerous brothers and cousins and sisters, they've utilized all of the gamut of benefits, from educational benefits to medical benefits to even most recently with my grandfather's passing, who was a Korean veteran, death benefits. So I understand completely what you're up against, and and having a brother who was a director at that Reno facility of Veterans Affairs, I understand a lot of what you do and how important it is. So thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
And Rick, I just wanted to really reiterate, going back to, your slide 15 here, looking at the dollar amounts from 2007 until this year, it is just astonishing, frankly. The
It
work
amazes
you've done.
me every year that it goes up.
Yeah, it truly is. And I was going to say that this is great. These are just numbers. What's important to me is the work that you and your staff do on the ground, whether it's the stand down or whether it's coming up to Colfax and serving. We served about three dozen veterans up there who said, oh my gosh, no one's ever talked to me about any of this stuff. It's just, it's really invaluable work. And I know that we're fortunate in our county that we actually do have a Veteran Services Department. I mean, in theory, it's mandated, I believe, by the state, but we actually have people who are assigned to do this. It's not just something they're meant to do in their spare
Exactly,
time.
right.
And it's critical that we continue to fund this. So thank you, and enjoy your retirement, whatever you do.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but I'm still going to be working behind the scenes and helping veterans and getting them into Placer County. So
Well,
you're not really rid of me.
Well, good. Then I look forward to seeing you out in the field. Thank you.
Just won't have to pay me.
Oh, even better. Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. Thank you. All right, we will now move on to Land Use and Facilities Services. James Importante, looks like James will be, and Allison be presenting. Graham, was there anything you wanted to transition us through? Okay.
Actually, we will be doing Cedra first. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. Good morning. James Importante, Management Analyst with the County Executive Office, here to introduce the Community Development Resources Agency, CEDRA. CEDRA is comprised of 4 divisions: administration, building inspection, which includes our code enforcement functions, engineering and surveying, and the planning division. And as a land use department, CEDRA has had to navigate through the economic downturn and has made adjustments in response to the declines in development activity. Department continues to shift resources where services are needed, and has temporarily continues to relocate staff or transferred or dedicated staff to the Department of Public Works and Facility Services for needed work there. As seen in the first slide, there are no major shifts in expenditures to coincide with revenues that have appeared to stabilize, indicating somewhat of an entering into a maintenance mode for this fiscal year. Year over year, we see that revenues have increased about 9%. Those are attributable to non-discretionary grant revenues for programs such as biomass and PCCP. In terms of positions, we have a decrease in 4.5 funded allocations. We currently have 6.5 funded vacant positions for a vacancy rate of approximately 20%. And new for this year, you see below, is a housing fund, Fund 106, which simply reflects the housing grants and loans that this department inherited earlier this year upon the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. And in terms of adjustments from proposed budget and the final budget adjustments, for administration, we have about $39,679 for pictometry aerial photography services that are fully funded through a Homeland Security grant. Planning has increases in revenue, about $148,190, and decreases of expenditures by $237,000, and those reflect the rebudgets of the revenues for some of our grant funded programs. And finally, the housing fund, $1.7 million, and essentially establishes the budget since it was not included in the proposed budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael Johnson and to discuss his department's accomplishments and future goals.
Thank you, James. Michael Johnson with the Community Development Resource Agency. With me today is my management team, and we are pleased to be here to present an overview of our budget for the coming year as well as our ongoing work program. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the management team. With me is Lauren Clark, Assistant Director for the agency, Paul Thompson, Deputy Director of Planning, Rick Erie, Engineering Manager, Chuck Grant, County Surveyor, Tim Wagner, Chief Building Official. Over here we have Kelly Berger, our GIS Manager, and in the back we have Donna Kirkpatrick, who is our Administrative Services Officer. Not able to be here today are Dan Dottai, Engineering Manager, and Amy Townley, our Fiscal and Budget Operations Manager. Over the past several years, as the board is well aware, the agency has gone through some significant changes. As a result of the downturn in the economy, the number of development applications and building permit applications has been reduced, and we have adjusted our staffing levels to match the actual workload demands. The best way to describe this past year for the agency has been a year of maintenance. While staffing levels have, staffing changes have leveled off, staff does remain flexible to address the work demands that are generated. To best utilize staffing resources and to address peak demand periods both here in Auburn and at our Tahoe office, the agency has been redirecting staff both from Auburn and Tahoe offices to address the ongoing work demands. This redirection of staff has allowed us to utilize existing staff and maintain existing staff levels while assuring adequate coverage throughout the county. To assure the highest level of utilization of staff, much of this past year has been spent cross-training staff so that they can become multidisciplined in the areas of coverage. While there has been a reduction in the number of development applications that staff has been reviewing, this doesn't mean that staff is sitting idle. Many county-sponsored projects have been moved forward, and I'll talk about those in a couple of minutes. One of those that staff has been working on is the TRPA Regional Plan Update. As has been reported to the board throughout the year, TRPA continues to move forward with its regional plan update, and TRPA anticipates the adoption of that plan in December of 2012. One of our great accomplishments this past year has been the adoption of the Granite Bay Community Plan Update. Staff resources were dedicated to look at the 1989 Community Plan and to determine what level of upgrades were required for that plan. As is consistent with all of our programs, there was an extensive public outreach program for the update. Some of the community meetings had upwards of 500 residents in attendance, and ultimately a plan was updated that reflects the vision of the larger Granite Bay community. On the development side, one of the big projects that was approved over the past year was the Homewood Mountain Resort project. This was approved by your board back in December. This was one of the largest projects approved in the Tahoe Basin over the past 10 years. And this project is a great example of the water clarity improvements that can be provided through new development. Agency staff continues to spend time looking at process improvements. Tim Wagner and his team have done an incredible job of updating the county's web pages. In addition to making the pages easier to navigate, special emphasis has been directed to allowing more applications and files to be accessible online. Because of this, staff does not need to help the public, and the self-help effort has been well received by the public, and the agency is seeing an increase in the activity on the county's web pages. All divisions within the agency have focused their attention on the turnaround times for development applications. There is always room for improvement in this area, but at the same time, staff is hearing back from development applicants that they are impressed with our increased turnaround time and the ability to get projects before decision makers in a timely manner. We're also looking at improving our customer service by allowing for the digital submittal of plans. Right now we're working on small building plan sets, but the intent is to move to allow for all of our plans to be submitted digitally. Not only will this reduce the amount of paper that is generated for development applications, but it will reduce the amount of travel time required for applicants to come into our office. We're also taking this time to spend a lot of time reaching out to community groups to make them aware of the many services that the agency provides. We have been conducting these over the past year. We're spending a lot of time at MAC meetings informing the residents of the different services that are provided, and we're seeing increased response in our office because of this public outreach. One of the public outreaches we're doing is we're working with the fire districts and special districts to allow for those agencies to access our online system so that they can provide will-serve letters directly to the county. This increased level of access has increased the involvement of the special districts, which has allowed for improved communications. One of the biggest undertakings that staff undertook this past year, and that was before your board, was in the redistricting process. Through the efforts of Lauren Clark, Kelly Berger, and the GIS team, staff was able to prepare a variety of alternative boundary maps for each of the districts for your board to consider. Consistent with your board's direction for community outreach, the redistricting alternatives were presented to every MAC in the county, as well as every city and various special interest groups. Because of the extensive public outreach, this was a relatively non-confrontational process. It went through very smoothly, and staff was able to meet the state-mandated deadline for the redistricting. During any year, events arise that we don't anticipate. It's not part of our work plan, but we need to be able to respond to it. This past year, the issue of liquid propane gas tanks became a very big issue that staff had to respond to. Tim Wagner and his team, in conjunction with Environmental Health, was very responsive in addressing this issue and working directly with the fire districts to assure that issues that were identified can be properly addressed and try to minimize the exposure in the future. For the coming year, staff is going to look at opportunities for the streamlining of the department operations. As the board is aware, one of the long-term goals is to organize the agency consistent with the other departments in the county, Facility Services and Department of Public Works. With the recent retirement of the Director of Engineering and Surveying, an opportunity has been presented where we can streamline the agency's organization into a series of divisions. And one of the thoughts is to reorganize and to streamline our operation to make engineering and surveying a division very similar to what has been done for planning and building over the past couple of years. One of the big issues that we continue to work with is addressing ongoing staff levels, and we're working with the county executive's office to address how do we maintain the level of service that we have been providing in the past while also working within our existing staff levels. As has been presented to your board throughout the past couple of days, there are a lot of demands for staff increases. And the agency staff is very cognizant of that, and our goal is to work collectively with you to address the needs while staying within our existing staff levels. I would like to highlight some of the projects that we're going to be working on over the coming year. Many of these are large-scale projects that will continue to require a lot of staff effort. While the regional plan for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency will be adopted in December of 2012, TRPA has opted to defer a lot of action until after the adoption of the regional plan. And so there will be an ongoing staff effort to work with TRPA to address the multiple plans that will be coming after the adoption of the regional plan. In conjunction with the TRPA regional plan update, staff started this year the updates of our many community plans up in the Tahoe Basin. Associated with these community plans has been an extensive public outreach process. We've had several community meetings to date. We've had one town hall meeting, and we will continue to maintain our public outreach so that the public can feel that they are an active participant in the community plan update. As with most of our community plan updates, this will be a multi-year project, and I'm sure we'll be back next year talking about the status of that project. The Cabin Creek Biomass Facility is finally coming to completion. The draft EIR is out for public review and comment at this point in time. It's anticipated that the final EIR will be prepared and completed in fall of this year, and it is hoped that a public hearing will be held before the Planning Commission in late this year. As was presented to the board at your April meeting up at Tahoe, we have received an application for the Village at Squaw Valley specific plan. This is a very large project dealing with the redevelopment of the resort area at Squaw Valley. Because of the scale of the application, there will be significant staff resources dedicated to this project to assure its timely review. Staff has also received a new application from North Star for an overall mountain master plan up at North Star. North Star, the Vail Resort, who operates the resort, intends to come in and identify all of the improvements that are needed to allow for the build-out of the resort. While no application has been submitted yet, staff has been working for the last several months with East-West Partners and Sierra Pacific Industries on a new development proposal that should be coming in that would take density from the east side of 267 that's allocated in the Martis Valley Community Plan and move that development to the west side adjacent to existing development in the North Star Resort. Right now the project applicants are working with the environmental groups to be sure they understand what's being proposed for it before the application is submitted, and it's anticipated that that development application will be submitted within the next 60 to 90 days. At the same time all of this is going on up at Tahoe, there's a lot of things going on throughout the rest of the county. County staff continues to be involved in the processing of the PCCP, the Placer County Conservation Plan. As directed recently by your board, we're moving forward with the preparation of the environmental document and finance plans for that document. And it's exciting that after all these years, the PCCP is coming to conclusion, and we actively are working towards bringing that for you, before you, hopefully within the next year for ultimate consideration. Staff is also working with the team from Facility Services on the All-American Speedway issues. Agency staff is associated and working with the environmental documents for this project, and the goal is to complete this within this fiscal year. Also, as directed by the board at your last budget hearings last year, staff has been working on a possible update to the Sheridan Community Plan. There are a lot of issues that continue to be addressed out in the Sheridan area, and from sewer and water capacity issues, and one of the things we're looking at as part of this community plan is what opportunities might be available to allow for additional growth out in that area. There's a myriad of other projects that I can address, but in the respect of time, I'd just like to focus on a couple of things that we will be looking at. One of the things that we anticipate delving into this year is an update of the county's general plan. As the board is aware, the general plan was last updated in 1994. The state recommends that agencies review and update their general plans every 15 to 20 years. What has been paramount for staff is to move forward with the PCCP, because that in itself will require many general plan amendments. We have identified that this is a very good time for us to have the overall update of the general plan follow on the heels of the PCCP, and that is one of the work programs that staff will be working on this year. You see up here we have a couple of final budget adjustments. The one that I would like to focus on is the pictometry for Western Placer County. The pictometry program is oblique aerial imagery that allows you to look at buildings and land uses from a multitude of angles. While this is a very important planning tool, the Sheriff's Department and Fire Departments are very anxious to have this program online because they will also be taking advantage of it. As noted, this is being funded through a Homeland Security grant, and we're very, very appreciative of that. There's much more that I can speak to. I've hit the highlights for what we've been working on. It's important to say, as you've heard from the other department heads, none of this could be successful if it weren't for the staff that we have. The agency staff in planning, building, engineering, our public services staff at our front counters do an exceptional job of providing the level of customer service that your board expects for our staff. And I am very pleased to stand here before you with the programs that we've identified and look forward to working together with your board for the implementation of these programs. We are available for any questions or comments you may have.
Supervisor Euler.
Michael, first of all, I think it's fantastic news, quite frankly, that you guys are as busy as you are. I'm glad to hear that there are a number of different projects. I think that portends good things for the future for our county, and I think that it also shows that folks are taking advantage of perhaps a slow time for actually selling finished product to work on the planning in anticipation of the fact that things might be coming back. My questions, you mentioned the stresses on the staff and the allocation of resources and all that. And so my question in terms of the staff utilization, management of time, all the rest, you know, when you're building a building, maybe having more people involved is a good thing, but building a spreadsheet, having more people standing around doesn't really help the end product. And so given the nature of what seems to be taking up a lot of the department's time, and that is more project-related work as opposed to process-related work, processing maps, working through issues with developers, but more specifically project-related work, is this the kind of thing where if you had more staff we'd necessarily see faster conclusions, or is it the kind of thing where you're managing a project and each project has a process within it, and the utilization of outside consultants is assisting moving that forward? I just kind of like your thoughts. I mean, if we're going to be looking at the possibility at the end of the day today of making recommendations in terms of do we want to direct additional resources to different departments, I just in my mind like to know where this stands overall as a priority. And so I guess what I'm asking is, and I don't think any department head's going to say, gee, no, I don't want any more staff. But I guess what I'm asking is from the standpoint of being able to accomplish deliverables in the time frame that the board would expect, the public would expect, but also given the constraints of what you have to go through in preparing environmental documents, utilizing outside consultants, and all the rest. Are these things that additional staff would help solve and expedite, or are we managing through? And what's your thought on that?
It's funny that you should raise a question like that, because this is the thought process that our management team goes through on a weekly basis. We sit down and we look at where are we this week? What do we have? What are our needs? What are our demands? How do we adjust our staffing? And what we have done over the past year, right now we believe we have adequate staffing. It may not always be in the right places, and that's why you see staff from Auburn going up and working on Tahoe projects. In some instances, we're bringing Tahoe staff back down here to work on construction projects as demand ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. So we're actively managing on a weekly basis where our staffing needs are, based upon the feedback we get from your board, based upon the feedback we get from the public, whether it's through letters, concerns, or complaints. We believe we have adequate staffing right now, and would hope to maintain that through the coming year. Is there a benefit to additional staffing? Always. But we realize we've heard from the assessor's office, we've heard from the auditor's office, we've heard from the treasurer tax collector, and we realize you have very difficult decisions before you on how to meet the finite monies that are available for those resources. So in a long-winded way, we believe we have the adequate resources to address these work programs that we have presented to you over this coming year.
And so far, I mean, again, given the more project-related nature, if you think that we're not moving as quickly on certain aspects that as we might be able to, are those the kinds of things where we simply by utilization of additional outside sources, outside consultants, we might be able to expedite projects on a project basis as opposed to, again, I guess I'm drawing the distinction between these projects that will end and go away versus what is the traditional ongoing permitting process and those kinds of things that we deal with.
Tim Wagner and I, as well as Dan Dautai and Rick Erie, once again, on a weekly basis, we're meeting to discuss what are our work demands, are we meeting our turnaround times, are there opportunities for us to possibly contract out work. We have a series of consultants on tap and available should the work demand require it. A couple of times over the past year, we've had to outsource some of our work, building permit reviews as well as plan checks. And this is something we'll continue to look at and monitor. Our goal is to assure that the staff that we have remains busy and active, and we use those consultants on an as-needed basis when the demand warrants it.
You just reminded me of something that, and thank you, I wanted to, along those lines, point out that I did have a constituent, happens to be my dentist, bought a building, was going through the TI process. When he submitted his plans, he was told, 6 to 8 weeks for plan review and all the rest. And of course, that immediately triggers a phone call. 6 to 8, really? And he was pleasantly surprised when actually it turned out to be 3 weeks. And I had to describe for him the difference between what the process can be, so properly set the expectation, but staff is always going to strive to deliver more efficiently, and you guys did. So he was definitely pleased when in 3 weeks he got his permit back for his TI. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Holmes.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I wonder if you could expand on the $45,000 for seniors first. Is that to help with any permits that might be needed for any handyman repairs?
Yes, it does. And that continues to be a very active program and one that is highly utilized throughout the county. We're glad that we can continue that. That was a program that used to be within a redevelopment agency. When the housing specialist came to the agency, that program carried over, and we're very, very proud to be able to keep moving that forward.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation.
Thank you.
A couple of things just that were generated from your comments and from the slides. Understanding that this is not a comprehensive listing of projects moving forward, it still strikes me that 6 of the 9 that are on here are really in the very east end of the county. And because we've talked about it, my concerns about adequate staffing in Tahoe, not just over the course of the year and in terms of how many permits are being processed at Customs House versus here in Auburn, but the really compressed time frame that we face in Tahoe because of the TRPA regulations about earth moving, basically. So I would continue to encourage you to work with the CEO's office to really do that analysis. How many permits in each place? What's the time frame? It does not concern me, but I think there's better ways to spend county dollars than pay people windshield time to be driving back and forth. I know how much time I spend driving, and it's longer from Tahoe to Auburn than from my house to Auburn. And if you're driving 2 hours each way, that's 4 hours of your day that you're spending in a car. And so I would just say an analysis of that to see, is there staff who, hey, they might want to move to Tahoe? You just never know. I suppose it's possible.
And that's actually, we have done that over this past year. We have had 2 members from the building staff who have relocated up to Tahoe. We have had a community development technician relocate up to Tahoe. And we currently, over the summer, to meet the engineering work demand, we have 2 inspectors that are up there. And so that is something, once again, that we're actively looking at and reviewing. Because you're right, it doesn't benefit anyone to pay windshield time for staff to drive back and forth. So is there an opportunity for us to have staff relocate up to the Tahoe area? And as some of you saw when you toured the Customs House, there is the ability for expansion of staff up there. The CEO's office has been looking forward and anticipating the ability, as staff ebbs and flows, the ability to have expansion space, and the Customs House up at Tahoe allows for that type of expansion, very much like the CDRC building allows for the expansion of staff.
Absolutely, and that's why we were all incredibly foresighted when we purchased that building, so yay us. The other thing that I just wanted to mention as part of the moving forward with the general plan update is Lauren and I have discussed a couple of things that I think are elements of that we should probably revisit. What's your expectation as to when you're going to come back to the board with a work plan for the coming year? Because I don't want to get into that today, but just want...
That's something that we still as a staff need to sit down and look at. As you saw from the projects that we have going right now, our staff is fairly tapped out.
Yeah.
At the same time, we need to look forward to and anticipate as the PCCP moves forward, when will there be an opportunity, when will it be the right time for us to look at updating the general plan. We anticipate it will be within this calendar year. That's why we wanted to bring it to your board's attention now.
Great.
And so I would anticipate within the next 4 to 6 months, we will be coming before you with some type of active program to outline what we believe needs to be done and what timeline that project may take.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any specific questions for any of Michael's staff who are sitting so patiently, just waiting to be tapped? Lauren, was there anything you wanted to add?
No.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you
really
very much.
Appreciate it. All right. We will move on to facility services. A man of few words. But a fabulous tie.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gretchen.
Gretchen Nedved with the County Executive Office, here to introduce the budget recommendations for fiscal year 12-13 for the Department of Facility Services. As you know, the Facility Services Department has 9 diverse budget areas, including capital improvements, building maintenance, parks and grounds, museums, environmental engineering, and utilities, to name a few. The total budget, the combined budget for the year, is $96 million, and that reflects a drop of about 7% or $7 million over prior year. That is mostly contributed to reductions in the Capital Projects Fund and some divisions in the General Fund. Within the Capital Projects Fund, the reductions are mostly from projects that have completed or are in the winding down phase. And in the General Fund areas, that is due to the department's continued approach at streamlining processes and becoming more and more effective. Just of note, ongoing projects are still included in the capital projects: the Auburn Animal Shelter, the South Placer Jail, and components of regional sewer projects. Funded and filled positions, as you see, continue to have a decline year over year, and that is again attributed to the department streamlining within available funding sources year over year. The fiscal year 12-13 budget maintains a focus on board priorities in partnership with the County Executive Office. There are 4 of them here. To name a few, the Capital Facilities Financing Plan will continue to be the long-range financing tool for the board's priority capital projects. The newly formed Infrastructure Investment Committee will bring together fellow county departments to discuss funding and priorities for countywide infrastructure and maintenance. Alternative service delivery will continue to be a department endeavor to deliver services in the most cost-effective way. And the Capital Improvements Committee will continue to give prompt attention to building maintenance needs, property management, and existing capital projects. Final budget adjustments, the most significant ones this year, are found in the Capital Projects Fund and the department's proprietary funds. In the Capital Projects Fund, there is a $5.7 million revenue reduction, but that is basically a technical adjustment to align prior year revenue receipts with current year project costs. New projects are added, and they include facility programming for various sheriff facilities in Auburn, facility programming for Health and Human Services relocation of Children's System of Care, a district attorney expansion for their office in South Placer, and outbuilding demolition at the Hidden Falls Regional Park. In solid waste, a $4.3 million reserve cancellation is made in support of the Applegate Regional Sewer Project. And in environmental utilities, an addition of about $1 million in reserves is made for planned future fixed assets. And lastly, operationally, the department continues to look forward to developing existing staff for succession planning and continuing to evaluate services provided within available funding. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim Durfee with the department.
Thank you, Gretchen. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here today. As Gretchen said, I'm Jim Durfee. I'm the Director of Facility Services. We are here in support of the CEO's recommendations for approval of our final budget. We're in concurrence with that office, and I wanted to give thanks to Gretchen for all of her hard work, James Importante. It's been a long, arduous budget process. I don't know if the board is fully aware, but actually for some of us, the budget process starts in late September, early October for next year. So we get about a month off, and then we'll start in again. And that's the metaphor today is we've got our sleeves rolled up. I do appreciate kind of the casual approach to this. I know Michael got up in the suit, makes me look bad. But Michael does that to me all the time. I did want to introduce my staff that are here today. I have a number of the management team is here today. Some fool gave Mary Dietrich vacation, so she's not here today, but she sends her best wishes to all of us. But I have Deputy Directors Joel Swift, Bill Zimmerman, and Mark Rideout here. And then several of the program managers are here. Our newest program manager, Vicki Grenier, is here. She runs our admin division. John Ramirez from Parks, Lori Morse from Property Management, and absent today are Kevin Bell, Gary Hengst, and Rob Unholtz. They're actually getting work done while we're down here. But we do, I just wanted to run through a number of different things for the department. We're not here asking you for anything except your support for the recommended approach. I'm going to walk through a number of evolutions that the department has undertaken over the last several years. I think that the downturn in the economy, the restriction of the budgets has actually been a very healthy exercise for all of the departments. I think in particular, we're pretty proud of the way that we've adjusted to those kinds of things and continue to provide services based on the various resources that are available to us. I'm going to kind of focus my discussion on that today. I'm going to start out, I'll just walk through all of the divisions very briefly, talk about accomplishments and somewhat of the challenges that we have and how we're addressing those. Administration is the first division that I'll talk about. It's really kind of our hidden division. It is exactly what it says. It administers this year about $95 million worth of funding for your board. These are the folks that pay all of the bills, make sure that things are done on time. Also handles all of our various personnel issues and so forth, the overall administration of the department. I think it's notable that our administration budget is $1.9 million, $1.9 million out of a $95 million budget. I think that's a pretty admirable approach. Now, there are administrative costs that are certainly inherent in all of the operations, but our pure administration budget is a very small proportion of our overall budget. That includes a number of members of the senior management team that are budgeted through this particular cost. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we're able to keep that down as low as we do. We did have some challenges last year. We lost our division manager suddenly had to retire due to a medical retirement. We were without technical leadership in that group for a little while. It put a lot of burden, frankly, on Valerie Bain and myself in terms of keeping that division going. We've recovered from that. We have a new manager in there, and we're working forward into the future with that. We will continue to face some attrition in that group. We know for sure that we're probably going to have a retirement this next year. It's a small group, so each person that leaves becomes critical, but we'll be working with the CEO's office on planning for how to address that. There are a couple of very noteworthy achievements in this group this last year, and in particular, I wanted to talk about the implementation of our interface with our facility asset management system. So a little bit of a kind of a behind-the-scenes thing, but about 3 or 4 years ago, your board approved funding for us to put together a facility asset management system. And what that did is it moved us out of the dark ages of using index cards and different paper files in order to keep track of the various assets within our buildings, the light fixtures, the HVAC systems, the plumbing fixtures, all of those kinds of things. We now have a modern system to do that. I'll talk a little bit more about it when I get to building maintenance, but one of the key components of that system was the ability to interface our work order system in building maintenance and parks into our timesheets, so that there was an automatic interface between those. And then that spills forward into an automatic billing system that bills all of our client departments. And we have vastly improved our ability to get the revenue that we earn by doing work for other folks. So we're vastly more efficient at bringing in the revenue than we used to be. And a lot of that is due to the work of this division on putting that interface together. So those interfaces were behind the scenes very large steps forward in the way that we manage our finances for the work that we do. In the upcoming year, we're going to be looking really closely at the organization of this group because of various different evolutions in the way that work is done. We want to be sure that we've got things staffed properly. We're going to be looking at that to be sure that we can maintain that efficiency that we've developed over the years in this group. And of course, staff development. The recurring theme throughout the department is staff development and succession planning. Somebody earlier talked about how wise their management group is. That could be taken a number of different ways, but a lot of us are getting grayer hair all of the time, and we are working on trying to develop a really strong succession plan to keep the department moving forward. Building maintenance also saw a major change this year. Longtime building maintenance superintendent Todd Pizarnik retired, and he's out riding his Harley somewhere and having fun right now. But we replaced Todd with Dennis Salter. Dennis was a senior architect with the Capital Improvements Division. Dennis also is a licensed contractor, very established person in the maintenance and construction fields, brings a lot of knowledge to the table here. And we're already seeing some of the fruits of having a different set of eyes looking at that division and the way they do things. Probably the two really high points for last year for the building maintenance division was full implementation of this FAMS program that I already talked about. We're now doing all of our work orders, all of our inventory control, all of the billing, and then the data collection on a building by building by building basis, so that we can, in the future, we'll be able to know when we fix that thermostat over there and what it costs to do it. So that's been it's a long process to get there, but it really made us, one of the hidden values of that is it really made us look at re-engineering the way we do a lot of that work and making it more efficient. So as part of the fruits of going through these bad economic times and developing new systems for how we manage, is that it makes us take a very close look at how we get the work done and how we can be more efficient. We're already starting to see a lot of fruit of that in terms of, as I said, bringing in the revenues that we were in some cases missing in past years, and just being a lot more effective about how we organize the work. So that's been a real step forward for us. The other thing that we were real successful this year is the South Placer Adult Correction Facility Testing and Operations Contract. One of the things that we looked at is how just as very much like the Sheriff's Department, how are we going to staff and operate this new facility? It is. You've had tours of it. You've seen how it was put together. It's a very complex facility. A lot of state-of-the-art systems in there. And we looked at different ways that we could be first shaking down the building, testing, making sure that everything worked, and then developing maintenance and management plans for the future. And your board will remember that back in the spring we brought forward a contract with a company called Kitchell to work us through that initial shakedown warranty phase of the facility. And that contract will also ultimately help us put together the maintenance plans, both deferred maintenance and ongoing maintenance, so that we can make decisions as to how to do that in the future as well, whether to use contract services, whether to target specific positions that we would need internally. And part of this next year's process will be working through that and coming back to your board with recommendations as to how we manage that facility in the future. So it's a pretty exciting achievement for last year, was getting that contract underway, and then we're going to be working on managing that and developing the information this next year. Throughout the year, though, really what we're focused on in building maintenance is how do we maintain service levels given the current level of resources that we have. We believe that we've got adequate resources to do what we're doing today. We're not here asking for more resources for that division. There will be continued evolution, though, of how we recommend to your board that we provide those services. We continue to evaluate on a specific discipline by discipline basis whether there are different ways that we can provide those services. So that really one of the primary goals for this year and probably for the upcoming number of years is to continue to evolve the way that we deliver services to provide the highest level service we can with the resources that are available. This is a recurring theme that you're going to see through a number of my slides. We're going to talk about service delivery methods a lot. In this particular group, we've had a lot of success with contracting services for custodial in a number of areas. We now do our routine generator services through contracts. The generators require monthly service and so forth, and we're doing that. Some of the building automation and other specialty areas, what that talks about is lighting, HVAC controls, so forth. We utilize Johnson Controls for a lot of the modern buildings, and we continue to look at ways that we can augment our staff and provide those real specific disciplines on an hourly basis rather than on a full-time basis where it makes sense to do so. We've also been very successful. We've talked a little bit about job order contracting over the years. The tenant improvement process in a lot of our facilities, and I think the Customs House is a great example. We utilize job order contracting for that. Your board awards a contract every year to a contractor that then we can go in on a unit cost basis, give them work orders, and they'll go in and do that work, get in, get out, and they're done with it. It's a very cost-effective method to do that contract type of work. We don't have to put together a bid and a specification each time we do it. We do that once a year. So administratively, it's a lot less expensive, and from a timing perspective, it's a resource that we can put on the ground really rapidly when something comes up that we don't have time to get into one of the normal queues, either for a bid process or for our construction crews to do. Frankly, our construction crews are fairly tied up on a yearly basis. We've got a lot of work queued ahead for them. So especially when we have to respond to something fairly rapidly, JOC, as we call it, has been a real asset to us. The Parks and Grounds Division, pretty steady. We've only had a little bit of attrition in that group. It's overall a younger workforce than some of our other groups, so we haven't had an awful lot of turnover in that group. What we've really done in terms of trimming budgets down in order to meet budgetary requirements over the last couple of years is we've greatly reduced the amount of extra help that we use. And one of the things that we want to work on in the Parks Division over the upcoming year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it takes, is to develop a model that addresses the seasonality of the workload in that group. Probably of all of our operations and facility services, this is the group that has a really high peak of seasonal workload that then drops off. Early spring, late spring, midsummer, and then autumn and winter, it drops way off. So we're looking at ways that we can augment our permanent workforce and address that seasonally. And we'll be working through all of the analysis of that. It really is probably the common way that most agencies and most private landscape companies staff is with a core group of skilled permanent workers that work all year round, augmented when the grass really grows really fast. And so we're going to be looking at ways to bring that to bear. But we had a number of major achievements in 11-12. I know near and dear to the board's heart and certainly to facility services is that we've initiated the expansion of Hidden Falls Regional Park. Construction on the 2 new bridges and the trails is currently underway. We would anticipate being able to open that to the public sometime during this fiscal year, probably late spring, early summer is when we're projecting that we'll be able to get people out there on that additional 900-plus acres at Hidden Falls Park. So we're very excited about that. We also initiated construction of Phase 2 of the Dry Creek Community Park down in the Dry Creek specific plan area. Long overdue. Frankly, the economic downturn, I think I talked about that when we awarded the contract. The economic downturn slowed the influx of park dedication fees into that group, and unfortunately, those folks down there have been without a park far too long. This year, they're going to have a brand new park with recreational facilities. We're really happy about that. The last bullet under major achievements, one of the things you may have noticed as you go through our campuses, particularly out at the Placer County Government Center, is a lot of rehab landscaping areas. And what we've done, this is one of the ways that we meet budget cuts over the years. What we've done is we've targeted old turf areas, different kinds of landscaped areas that were frankly high maintenance, high water use. And we haven't budgeted projects for this. We've done it internal to our budget. We've absorbed rehabilitating those areas into areas that are large planter areas, bark, shrubbery with very targeted irrigation, so that we've reduced our water use along with reducing the labor that it takes to maintain those areas. So we continue to try to evolve those landscaped areas. One of the new projects that we actually had recommended and that the CEO is recommending is for rehab of the landscaping at the front entrance of the Auburn Branch Library. That landscaping is plus or minus 35, 40 years old now. It gets beaten to death. The traffic at that facility has been very hard on it. But we'll be working with the library, the Friends of the Library, and internally to come up with a design that rehabilitates that area, looks much better than it looks now, but accomplishes some of the things that we're talking about here as well. It'll use less water and be less labor intensive to take care of.
And Jim, before you move off that, so that's both the landscape and the hardscape?
That would be together, yes. Okay. Yeah. In that particular case, a lot of what we've done has not been hardscape. In that case, it will be, we're going to probably tear out an awful lot of the concrete in front of that building and redo it as part of that project. It's not designed yet. We're in the kind of early discussion area of that right now. A couple of other things that will be going on in parks, of course, is Michael touched on it, is Parks will be working closely with CEDRA on the various community and general plan updates. There are a number of parks service policies and so forth that we'll be taking a close look at and potentially making recommendations to your board on adjustments to those. Some of them are fairly old. I've already talked about service delivery there. Museums division. Museums is our smallest division. There's 6 folks there and about a $840,000 a year budget. And these folks do a remarkable amount of work with $840,000. We run 6 museums. We've actually, as we've trimmed budgets, we've actually increased some of the programs in that division. And Melanie Barton and her group have done a fantastic job on that. We've been able to actually maintain the normal service levels at the county museums and actually increased both the living history and heritage trail programs. The living history program actually brings revenue into the mix. It's not a lot of revenue, but it does bring revenue to the table. And literally we get to run a couple thousand elementary-age children through that program every year and give them hands-on experience at some of the historic operations within the county. So we're very, very pleased with that. They also successfully opened a temporary exhibit. I hope you got over to see the history of hats in America. And really exciting to us is that we're programming a move into a new facility out at the Placer County Government Center for the archives and collections facility. Archives, it was embarrassing. They were in the worst facility that we operate, bar none. It was absolutely an embarrassment to me to walk into that facility. We took over the old dental clinic that was moved out of by HHS a couple of years ago. We're in the process of completing the tenant improvements into that facility and should by October or November be actually physically moving into that and operating out of that. So that's really exciting, gets a really important kind of hidden asset into a much more sound facility, and we'll protect that, give those folks a much nicer place to work, and more importantly, probably give the public better access to all of that. So we're really, really pleased to be able to do that. Capital improvements, this is probably, other than regional sewer and sewer stuff, this is probably the division that your board hears most about, because we bring projects to you all the time for recommendations and approval. But they've had a pretty darn good year. We're about 98% complete at the end of 11-12. We're about 98% complete with the construction of the South Placer Adult Corrections Facility. It's just the largest capital project the county's ever undertaken. So we're pretty proud to be at the point where we're almost complete with that. Right now we're completing final kind of closeout negotiations with the design-build contractor. I think every indication is that I'll be able to come to your board with a completion of that project very soon that completes the project within the allotted budget. So not only is it a very large project, we're going to complete it with I am going to tell you that we're burning up almost all the contingency, but we are going to complete it within the budget that I believe that your board approved for it. I don't anticipate coming back and asking for any more money. We're very proud of that accomplishment. It's quite a facility. We also completed construction of the Dry Creek and Atwood fire stations, a parking lot up at Salmon Avenue, and then Phase 1 of the Dry Creek Community Park, which was the underground work in preparation for the work that's underway right now. We're looking forward to the closeout of the construction of the SPACF, as I mentioned, and then over the upcoming months we're going to be managing construction of the Dry Creek Park out of this division. We're working on, right now, site selection and design-build team selection for our next major project, which is the Auburn Animal Shelter, and then a number of smaller projects. As always, this group is always very busy. Your board has seen the capital projects list, and we have a lot of things queued up, much smaller in scale than what we've done the last few years, but they continue to be very busy. In terms of service delivery methodologies here, we do almost none of the design in-house, very small stuff that we do in-house. We utilize outside consultants for all of our design work. Quite often we use outside consultants for contract management on the larger projects. We kind of have about a $2.5 or $3 million rule of thumb, to where we really, a project above that, we really start to look at whether or not we want to bring in a CM firm to help us with the detailed management of those. It's a very cost-effective methodology because they're looking after your money. So we continue to utilize outside resources with a core group of accomplished architects and project managers. The Property Management Division, again, has been very busy. Lori and her group have worked through a number of really large issues over this last year. A little bit hidden to the Board of Supervisors, but Supervisors Duran and Wygant are aware that we purchased a piece of property for the Western Regional Waste Management Authority, WPWMA, pardon me. I'm the executive director. I should know the name of it. But we had an opportunity to purchase the acreage directly adjacent to our landfill. Had successful negotiations with the seller, but this group actually handled all of the paperwork for that, and it's a pretty complex process. It was a complex acquisition, so that was a big deal for them. It's hidden from this group a little bit, but it's a purchase that over time will accrue very, very significant value and savings to the residents of Placer County. So we're pretty proud to have been a part of that. We've divested a couple of pieces of property this year. It's not something that we do an awful lot of, but from time to time we have surplus property that it doesn't make sense for us to keep into our inventory. This year we sold a piece of property to the town of Loomis for their use and for some commercial use, and we also quitclaimed the Colfax Courthouse over to the city of Colfax for their use. And so we've divested a couple of pieces of property to where they can be utilized far more effectively than what we were doing. A couple of other different pretty important things that we're working on are conservation easements, We have constant work to maintain access to the beaches up at Lake Tahoe. That's an ongoing challenge for us. And property management was also very, very instrumental in final development and implementation of that facility asset management system that I talk about. It integrates all of our real estate into that same fold. Number of upcoming things. We're going to be working on acquisition of connectivity properties for Hidden Falls and also the Side Hill Citrus Conservation Easement. We're nearing completion, making a lot of progress on the vacation of the Bell Gardens Apartments. We've talked to your board about that. That process is moving along. And again, just kind of the normal stuff that we work with all the time. Probably one of the things that's not typical is that we're going to actually begin a pretty major lead remediation project at the Lincoln Missile Site. We have an old shooting range out there and a trap range that we're responsible for the lead contamination on the ground. We've got a plan into the regional board for how to do that. I think we're nearing completion with negotiations on them. There's a project funded for that, and we anticipate implementing that during the year this year. It's about a $600,000 project at this point in time. This group, they do a lot with about a half a dozen folks. We do augment staff resources there with some professional consultant services, and we have a small extra help budget, and our intention this year is to really focus on student interns on a real project-specific basis to try to bring some assistance to bear on a case-by-case basis. Environmental utilities, one of our more complex divisions, and it's complex structurally, and of course the work they do is fairly broad and varied, and surprisingly we do things besides regional sewer out of this group. It's been our major focus for the last couple of years, but there's a lot of work going on here besides that particular project. Environmental utilities is one budget unit, but it's actually two divisions. We have a utilities division. Those are the folks that are out actually physically working on the sewer infrastructure, and then we have an engineering division, which is exactly what that says. It engineers and manages contracts related to the sewers and also to our solid waste operations. The engineering division also, as a side, also provides the staffing to the Western Placer Waste Management Authority. The major achievements for the engineering division over the last year, of course, was we completed a major project at SMD3 to denitrify the wastewater there. It essentially brings that discharge into compliance with our current permit. It's a Band-Aid for that particular wastewater treatment plant. The plant's nearing 50 years old. It's about 45 years old right now. So while it gets us in compliance, it doesn't provide a future for that, is what I'm saying. Your board's well aware that we're working on a project to actually construct a pipeline from that treatment plant down into SMD2. The water would then flow through the SMD2 system and down to Roseville. It is probably the only long-term solution to compliance in that area. We have a draft EIR out right now. We've been working through some issues with the community. Thanks to Supervisor Euler, I think we came to conclusion on probably the one real controversial issue in that. We'll be working forward through the completion of the EIR and bringing back a project to your board over the upcoming months. Again, there's a WPWMA project on here. We completed a major expansion of the compost area down there. One of the reasons that we're able to keep our solid waste costs down, and we've kept them pretty static for about 8 years now. We haven't been raising the fees to the customers for solid waste on the western side of the county, is that we're able to compost the green waste. We bring in thousands of tons of green waste a year. We had to expand our pad down there and our operation in order to accommodate that, but it's a very cost-effective way to deal with that material. And so it's something that we're able to do down here because composting is so viable. And this group managed the expansion of that pad. Number of different sewer projects that we're working on. We're actually under construction on the Applegate Regional Sewer Project as we speak. That should be done potentially over the early part of the winter, more likely probably springtime before that pipeline is done. That'll just depend on weather and if there are any complications. So far, it's going quite well. We recently initiated improvements in the circulation and tipping area up at the Forest Hill Transfer Station for that community. And of course, we have ongoing negotiations with City of Lincoln on the SMD1 regional project, and your board's been kept pretty fully aware of that. Over the upcoming years, or a year, we're going to continue to work on all of those projects. We're looking forward to the completion of those. Also, we have a water supply project in Sheridan, which is ultimately going to open up the ability for vacant lots in Sheridan proper to develop. We've had a long-term issue with no available sewer capacity. We resolved that issue a couple of years ago with the help of your board, and we created a number of new sewer connections. Now we also at the same time have been working on increasing the domestic water supply. We're going to be installing a new well and a new storage tank in Sheridan this upcoming year, primarily with grant funds, and that will A, it'll improve fire safety in that area, and B, it opens up the potential for vacant lots in that community to develop. We're also embarking on a pretty major improvement project at WPWMA in terms of the entrance area improvements and the public tipping facility. Again, not directly related to your board, but it's work that this group is doing, and it's important that you understand that they're busy on that. And probably most important on this list is developing a long-term operations strategy for the Eastern Regional Material Recovery Facility. The contract for operation of that facility is up in a couple of years now. We're entertaining negotiations with the current operator, trying to come up with a plan that makes that facility more cost-effective. There's a lot of challenges up there in terms of the geography and the weather and so forth. It's never going to replicate what we're able to do down on the west side because of both volume and those other constraints, but we're working through a number of possibilities to try to get more diversion out of that facility at a better cost. And so we've got active negotiations underway at this point in time, and we'll be keeping your board informed on that. Probably under service delivery methods, that first bullet, we're really starting actively now that there's a decision made as to how we're going to proceed with regionalization. That will have some potential long-term staffing impacts on this group in particular, and then also on the utilities group. So we're looking forward and looking to see what that will be. I think the larger impact will be on the utilities group because that's where the wastewater treatment plant operators are funded. But in terms of this group, once we're not designing and building and operating wastewater treatment plants, the mix of engineering work changes as well. So we'll be looking at that for this group. It's a long-term issue, but we're just starting to really dig into that right now. The last group I wanted to talk about was our utilities group. I'll talk a little bit about widgets here. I haven't talked about that very much in this. But I think it's important to know that these folks take care of about 250 miles of sewer pipelines, and we have a goal to try to hydro clean and inspect those lines on a very regular routine basis. And so it's pretty important that we're keeping track of those kinds of things. You can see they did almost 500,000 lineal feet of hydro cleaning this last year. Hydro cleaning is not the most glamorous job in the world. It's why our sewers don't overflow, though. If you let grease or roots or obstructions build up in the sewer lines, we end up with overflow. So hydrocleaning is really the really important function that these folks provide on a daily basis. They're also the guys that are out there in the middle of the night when it's raining really hard, keeping things contained. So it's kind of unsung heroes in this group, and they do a very good job, and particularly when there's an emergency. We had PG&E. Actually broke a water line in Sheridan yesterday, and between these guys working on it and PG&E was quite responsive, we had it back up and running in about 4 hours. And nobody was, I think only a small number of houses were actually without water at all. Most of the community experienced a little bit of low volume, low pressure for a few hours, but these folks are just on the spot when there's those kind of emergencies, and I mostly wanted to give them kudos for what they do. From a service delivery standpoint, again, we have to look at the implications of the regional sewer projects on our staffing and how we do things. We do a lot of consultant services and technical contract services for equipment maintenance and so forth at the treatment plants. We are looking at our maintenance schedules and activities to determine if there's ways that we can augment staff resources with contract services. This is primarily a growth issue and an attrition issue, but as our service areas grow, and we all hope that development kicks back up at some point in time, but as development occurs, we take on more miles of sewer that we have to maintain. And one of the ways we're looking at stretching our resources is, are there readily available contract services that could be utilized rather than permanent staff, and does that make sense? Is it more cost effective or not? So we're going to be looking at those things, and as development occurs, as growth occurs, we'll be bringing back recommendations to your board or options for your board that we think make the most sense, and have that discussion at that point in time. So with that, I do want to again thank the CEO's office and my staff. Thank your board for the support that you've given us over the years, and particularly looking forward into this year. I have staff available and happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Supervisor Holmes.
Early in the presentation, Gretchen had mentioned the relocation of the Children's System of Care. Is that the facility over on Enterprise Drive that's going to be relocated? Or did I misunderstand that?
You know, I'm going to turn to Joel. You want to talk about that?
Good morning. Joel Swift, Deputy Director. That actually is more related at this point to the South Placer component, Kirby Hills and Conroy, where we're looking at the overall plan for resolving some of the lease situations in the South Placer area and packaging that up and finding the best location for those units down there.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Joel.
Jim, I just wanted to put out there again, just as a reminder, because I bring it up every time I get the opportunity, Burton Creek, and both the relocation of the DPW facilities there, which is not your purview, but also some strategic planning for what we're going to do with that facility, since we're now fairly certain we won't be partnering with the state, but even that's not still writ in stone.
It is still a moving target. It's absolutely one of the important components of our facility planning efforts.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? All right, in that case, we will move on to DPW.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all your staff for coming today. Thank you for all the great work you do, especially you, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, James Importante again with the County Executive Office. Here to introduce Public Works, and DPW is comprised of 8 budget units, including road maintenance, engineering and transportation, fleet, Placer County Transit, Tahoe Regional Area Transit, NPDS, Blue Canyon Airport, and administration. Going to the budget, year over year, the net budget decreases by 13%, attributable to progress made on various transportation projects. Coinciding, we have revenue decreases of about 14%. We also have a use of fund balance increases by 38%, and the story behind that is, if you recall, a couple months ago, your board received a presentation on a countywide infrastructure and the discussion of challenges relating to the maintenance of the county's transportation system, particularly the roads. Prior to that, the department's taken a conservative approach in budgeting and assuming in proposed budget no fund balance carryover. The story here is that we are fortunate to have fund balance carryover materialize in an amount of about $3.2 million. And so the department has proposed to utilize this fund balance to fund a $2.7 million road resurfacing project and replacement of 2 aging snow blowers. In terms of positions, there are decreases in 3 funded allocations, or approximately 2% from last year. And currently, DPW has 18 funded vacant allocations, primarily in the road maintenance and fleet divisions, attributable to retirements. In terms of final budget adjustments, we have a minor budget adjustment in administration, $897 for a PC. We have $18 million increase in engineering and transportation revenues with a $20 million increase in expenditures for various transportation projects. And in roads, we have an increase of $282,000 in rebudgeted grant revenues and $1.7 million in expenditures attributable to the snow blowers previously mentioned. And then for PCT and TART, each have a $37,500 adjustment for upfront OPEB payments for bus drivers. And in fleet, we have an increase of $311,500 in revenues and $349,000 in expenditures, primarily for additional replacement vehicles for HHS, probation, and the Sheriff's Department. And with that, I introduce Ken Grem, your Director of Public Works, to discuss his department.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the board. My name is Ken Grem with the Department of Public Works. And I appreciate the opportunity today to talk a little bit about the Public Works budget and what's going on this year, and really have 4 areas I want to talk about. A little bit about our accomplishments. What have we done with the funding you've entrusted to us this past year? Also, what we plan on doing this year. Finally, some challenges and some risks that we have moving forward in the next couple of years. And then we'll close with just what we plan on doing with the fund balance, which is what James has just talked about. So talking about what we've been doing in the past year. In our transit area, it was really the year of technology. A lot of grants out there, particularly Homeland Security types of grants to improve security for transit operations, which are considered a risk area. We are in the process, or we actually have already completed, putting GPS technology on all of our Placer County transit buses down here in the western slope of the county. And as we speak, we're doing the same with our TART buses up the way. We are using a proprietary method called Zonar, and it also has some other capabilities that we're making use of. In fact, now for our daily safety checks that are required on our transit buses, we have a new system that now requires that a sensor be put at every location that has to be tested, so that our operators have always done it, but now there's a way electronically to have them make sure they're checking those things, and it goes to a database that then is secured to ensure we have the record that all those safety checks have been done. Something we haven't had in the past, much more efficient than the old paper writings that we used to keep in files. In addition to that, in 2013, we're going to be installing surveillance cameras, I shouldn't say, security cameras in our transit buses. And that's really for the safety of our patrons as well as our operators, kind of the latest and greatest protocols for transit operations, all funded through grants specifically for those improvements. But probably what I'm most excited about in the technology side is our next bus technology, because this starts bridging information, real-time information, to our actually bus patrons. This is occurring in TART, already been softly released. Using GPS technology, up on the upper left, you can see there's a screenshot where our managers and actually the public can go see where our buses are at any given time. This was a snapshot in time, and you can see we have 3 different routes up there at Tahoe, and you can see exactly at that point in time where those 7 buses were. Well, not everybody, though, gets to have a laptop or, at their computer terminal when they're out there trying to ride our bus. And so there's actually here on the lower right, there's a downloadable app now that people with their smartphones can now download our app, and they can have, and their phone will tell them where they're at and when the next bus is coming. It'll show them where the bus is at, when the next bus is coming, not based on the schedule, but based on where it is at that point in time and at its average speed, when is it going to get there. So bridging this gap to our patrons, it really brings us to what we're looking forward to is our grand opening of our Tahoe City Transit Center here up on the left. A new, safe, comfortable facility where people can park their cars to ride the bus, or they can choose to transfer from one bus to another bus. This is a major node within our system. We will be employing the next bus technology at a kiosk at this facility when it opens up, so the people there will know when the next bus is coming of the various buses that come into that location. We also have other projects going on. We broke ground this year on our Cook-Riolo Bridge replacement project. A couple photos there showing that going, I'll say, going very quickly and going very well. scheduled to be open at the end of 2013. We also have 2 other bridge replacement projects going on Brewer Road in the western portion of the county. In addition to that, last year we celebrated the rewatering of the meadow in Lake Forest, including the creek there. And that was a long ago diverted creek that went down into a pipe down into the lake, and the meadow dried up. We have restored that meadow, and actually nature has come back and actually kind of revalidating our efforts with kokanee salmon shown there at the bottom left, coming up to check a look and see what's going on in the Lake Forest meadow. We're very proud that that's happened. We're probably going to be showing that picture a lot every time we see him coming up, because I think it just shows the success of the restoration effort. For at least the next couple of years, you're also going to hear every year a little bit about Forest Hill Bridge. We're going through the retrofit and the painting going very well. A big giant erector set, taking off big giant pieces, replacing them with either a new piece, a stronger piece, or a different piece. Here's just some photos of what's going on there. $60 million project, funded almost entirely by the federal government for these types of projects. Last fall, we were able to celebrate with Sheridan Elementary School new pathways we were able to construct within their community to get to school. In the past, children had to walk in the street, very narrow street. If you look on the lower right here, you can see the street off to the left. It's that light gray color. We came through a Safe Route to School grant, and were able to put pathways on numerous streets north of Riosa Road leading to this school. The upper right shows the celebration we had with the students after the opening when they came back to school last year. Just a great project helping kids get to school safely. We continue to do environmental improvement projects, particularly up in Tahoe, becoming even increasingly more important because with our new stormwater permit, we actually have very defined goals of sediment removal we need to do on our roadways for water that gets to the lake. These types of projects are our #1 way to get there. Tahoe City Residential Project was completed this past year. In addition to that, Tahoe Pines Project was completed. And then we are almost completed with the Brockway Environmental Improvement Project. That'll probably be completed here in the next 6 to 8 weeks. All very important, making our efforts to improve stormwater and water clarity at the lake. We're also involved in other projects, not just the ones that we do. We work with PG&E on their undergrounding of overhead utility projects, typically found on commercial corridors. That program is funded by the ratepayers as mandated by the California Public Utilities Commission to do these types of projects. We have 2 projects that are substantially completed within the county just recently. We have our Highway 49 project, which is between Nevada Street and Luther Road. And then we had another project up in Carnelian Bay. And so you can see the before and after with all the above ground utilities, what it looks like today with all those poles removed. Pretty tremendous change before and after. We have one of those projects that's currently under construction in Meadow Vista on Placer Hills Road in downtown Meadow Vista. We've got 2 other projects that are in various forms of design by PG&E. We have the Phase 2 of Highway 49, which is really several areas north of New Airport Road. And then we also have a new project that will be beginning design in Tahoe Vista. A couple years ago, I shared with you we had developed a traffic accident analysis system, really a graphical database of all the accidents that occur in the county. And at that time, we were talking about some of the projects, how we every year look for our hot spots, and then see are there things that we can do to improve those areas and enhance safety. At that time, we shared Willarga Road, how we were dramatically reducing accidents with some very modest signage improvements. We got another good example in this past year, and it's on Mount Vernon Road near Joger Road. We had a curve, lots of accidents. That bottom photo shows X's where we had all these accidents occurring over time. With some select tree removal, some bigger, more pronounced signage, we've been able to reduce the collision rate by 78%. Substantial improvement with very modest costs, and made possible because we actually have a tool that lets us know where those hot spots are and lets us know where we can focus our attention. We're going to continue to do those types of things each and every year. So then it comes down to, all right, that's kind of some of the highlights of what we did last year. What are we going to do this year? None of this is meant to be all-encompassing. I think we personally believe that probably that's more more plentiful than the stars in the sky of what we've done. But these are just some highlights. This map shows all the projects we're working on this year. The yellow represent the road projects, the green represent bridge projects, blue represent our environmental improvement projects, and orange, I'll say, are kind of our miscellaneous projects. What I want folks to be able to see here, they're spread throughout the county. I want to also make sure people understand all the funding we get for these projects are for funds dedicated to transportation purposes. And for by and far, they're specific grants for very specific projects. They can't be used for other priorities. For more detail, we also every year, and we once again produce our project book. This is also available online. For each one of those dots, there's a sheet of paper in here that tells you about what that project is, where it's at in development, and when we hope that it will be delivered. And a couple photos just showing a couple highlights of those. Your board approved a finance plan for the north phase of Auburn-Folsom Road widening this past spring. Also the last phase of widening Auburn-Folsom. And as you can see from some of these recent photos, this has now become the bottleneck. There is a need to get this road widened. We're looking to complete the right-of-way acquisition. A couple more details left to be done, but we are planning on breaking ground in 2013 on this project. In addition, we got a grant for filling in sidewalk gaps. Sierra College Boulevard has a lot of great areas with great pedestrian facilities. Then there are other areas kind of like this where it's just blank, and it's very difficult for people to walk in these areas. Our proposed project that will be constructed, most likely starting in the winter and going into next summer, will fill in most of these gaps with a safe pedestrian sidewalk. We'll continue to do environmental improvement projects. Your board just recently approved actual award of construction contracts for our Homewood Community Water Quality Project, as well as our Lake Forest Highlands Environmental Improvement Project. So those are actually under construction or will be imminently under construction. We also hope this year to finalize a finance plan for the Snow Creek Restoration Project. We got a conservation grant, several years ago to actually purchase an old industrial property that had begun, or more than begun, had encroached into the watershed or into the creek. Our project is intending to restore that project. Substantially funded, still a small funding gap that we're seeking, but we're hoping to be able to do that beginning next summer, or at least get the finance plan in place. Actually, before we go there, there are other projects we have going on. Don't have photos necessarily for all of them, but a couple I want to make special note of. Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project, $48 million project. Our goal this year is to complete the finance plan for that project. We still have about a $10 million shortfall in that project, even though we have about $38 million. Our goal is to get that finance plan in place, and then we hope to break ground on at least a phase of the improvements starting next summer. In addition to that, we talked about how we had celebrated with Sheridan Elementary School on some of these pathways north of Riosa Road. We also have a proposed project to rehabilitate and improve Riosa Road going through the community, kind of the main street going through their community. Right now, it's really a strip of pavement where people pass through. We want to make that a more enhancement to the community with curb gutter, sidewalk, drainage improvements, as well as some modest landscaping in the form of trees. That will be happening this summer also, or next summer also. So then let's talk a little bit about some of the risks and challenges that we have kind of moving forward. I think the first one, and probably most imminent, the state has come out with a new proposed statewide stormwater permit that will affect the western portion of our county. Recently, we went through some negotiations in the Tahoe Basin to try to moderate some of the requirements they were putting on us in the Tahoe Basin. We believe we've got that how do we get that out? But we think we're there at that point where we can get that done, looking to have the regional board approve that in the coming months. But the statewide permit is probably even more onerous than what was proposed in Tahoe. Fortunately, we have lots of partners. We're going to be in the process of working with our partners to start that negotiation with the state board. Kind of how I explain it to people, it appears that the state board has really looked at anything that has ever been done for water quality in this state by anyone, And they're now proposing that everybody do everything that anybody has ever done. And it is very onerous. I'm sure there's going to be there will be some discussion. The question is, how much are we going to be able to negotiate? It is a growing area, more expensive area. We're probably going to be spending more than we ever thought on stormwater quality. Our goal is to try to bring that down into a manageable number. We'll be involving your board as we advocate our efforts with all of our partners. Earlier this summer, the federal government passed a new transportation bill, which was very good, making sure federal transportation dollars continued flowing. But part of that was consolidating various programs. And one of the programs that got consolidated away was the Highway Bridge Program. There is a set aside for what we call our minor bridges. They call them the off-system bridges, our minor roadways. But the on-system roadways, there's currently not a dedicated fund source for those anymore. Those are roads like Willarga Road, Watt Avenue, and there are a number of others. We are working with our partners to try to reestablish some sort of set-aside because we are still going to get the same amount of money as a state. It's now just going to go into a bigger pot. And unfortunately, I believe that replacing an existing bridge will probably never compete very well with all the capacity-enhancing projects, particularly in the urbanized areas, the Bay Area, Los Angeles. There needs to be a focus on maintaining and replacing our bridge infrastructure. There are lots of structurally deficient bridges in this state, and it won't become a priority unless some money is set aside to do that. The next area, and actually there's some good news in this area, is in our rotary snowplows. We operate 12 rotary snowplows in this county. 5 of them are of this era, early 1970s era. They're about 40 years old. You can look from the cab. They don't make them like this anymore. In fact, these aren't made anymore. The company went out of business. When we want to replace it or when we want to fix something, we actually have to jerry-rig parts or salvage them from an old one that we can find. We've actually crossed over the United States trying to track down old ones that people are getting rid of, to actually purchase them so we can use them just for the parts they have. Some of these spend more time in the shop than they actually do blowing snow. The good news is we were able to generate some road fund balance. Again, can only be used for transportation purposes. One of the things we're asking you today is let us allocate for 2 new rotary snow plows $1.2 million, $600,000 apiece, they're not cheap, to going towards replacing that aged fleet. The last area I want to talk about has to do with our road resurfacing programs. And really to understand the road resurfacing programs, you first got to understand a little bit about how roads deteriorate. This is a typical deterioration curve, at least in that reddish-pink line. When a road's new, slowly degrades over time. And at some point in time, it starts deteriorating very quickly. And then at some point, a little further down the road, can't get any worse than that, and it starts flattening out again. And what's important to realize about this is that what does it take to maintain a road at any given time on that curve, and how much does it cost to maintain it? When you're at the top portion of that curve, that's when we do slurry seals and chip seals. As you move down the curve and get into what I call going off the cliff, very quickly you got to start doing an overlay. And eventually, if you go beyond that to where the pavement actually totally fails, you've got to reconstruct it. When you're on that upper portion of the curve, it's about $30,000 to $50,000 a mile to seal that road. As you go into the overlay, it's about $250,000 a mile to overlay that road. And if you let it go to where you have to replace it, you're talking anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million a mile. So everything we do in road resurfacing and in our road maintenance is how do we keep things at the top of the curve where it's very easy to move it up in the quality of the pavement. So where are we at now? Actually, you can see there's these numbers on the left-hand side. We call that our pavement quality index or pavement condition index. Right now we're at a 62 for an average, some higher, some lower. It's actually pretty good. We're solidly in the fair area. In fact, our major roadways are at a 68. That's almost good. We are very fortunate. That didn't come about just by happenstance. Came by from a couple things that have happened in the last 10 or 15 years, because in 2000, or actually the late 90s, we had an average PCI of 47. It was actually poor. At that time, we did a very aggressive overlay, with your board's help, an aggressive overlay and seal program that allowed us to start bringing our roads back up to a standard. We also benefited from the fact that during the 2000s, we had a lot of growth and a lot of new roads coming in, which meant we had a lot of roads coming in at 100 that helped average out. So it was a combination of things, but it took both of those things to bring us up to where we're at today. And so historically, we've done about 90 miles of sealing every year. We've done about 10 miles of overlay every year. Last fiscal year and this fiscal year, just because of the financing, we've done 0 miles of overlay, and we've done about 50 miles of seal every year. That's not going to be sustainable long term. We're going to have to work on that moving forward. I do hope long term, the 90 miles, that means you get a seal about every 12 years, because we have a little over 1,000 miles of road. That worked for us in the past. I think it can work for us moving into the future. With a 10 miles of overlay a year, that's about an overlay every 100 years. If you do things right on the early part of the curve, that's what we're hoping we'll be able to do. Of course, the more we let things fall off the cliff, the larger that number may need to be. And so to do that kind of program takes about $4.5 million a year. Right now, that money isn't in our typical road fund budget. We are going to be using road fund balance. We believe road fund balance should be used for one-time things. We're not going to use it to hire new people. We're not going to use it for things for ongoing expenses. But when it comes to the equipment we need, resurfacing, that's where we're putting the vast majority of those dollars in, and what we're proposing this year to put the vast majority of those dollars into. Which brings us really to our road fund balance. We did have a substantial road fund balance. I think James mentioned a little over $3 million this year, larger than normal. And I think that came about really because we had a lot of attrition in road maintenance. We're going to need to replace many of those people, but we do have the salary savings from last year as they were all retiring. We had a couple fund sources that were actually scheduled to sunset and actually got reestablished for at least one more year. And then in addition to that, we actually found for the first time where we were thinking funding was still trending down, we actually had a small uptick in that. And so all those things came together to ensure this $3 million windfall, or I won't say fund balance. So we don't want to use that for ongoing expenses. We want to use it for things we want to, for one-time expenses. We're proposing that you authorize us to do 2 new rotary snow plows, $1.2 million, and then $1.3 million in the road resurfacing program, and particularly these various types of seals, so that we can do about 40 to 50 miles this year of road resurfacing. So moving forward, and I think in just closing, I do hope as we talk more about infrastructure as a county, perhaps making infrastructure an opportunity to make it a higher priority than where it is today, that perhaps we can look at reinstituting the road overlay program that your board helped fund for many years prior to the recession in 2007. Used to provide a $2.2 million contribution that allowed that 10 miles to be done. When the time comes, when there's that opportunity, we hope that you'll reconsider that. There's lots of roadways throughout the county. You know, ones that notable that just come to my mind, Douglas Boulevard, portions of Douglas Boulevard, Sierra College Boulevard, a whole host of community roadways on the west shore and north shore of Lake Tahoe, and even some in some of the rural areas like Fruitvale Road, Bald Hill Road, that really have gone over that cliff that we're going to need to overlay. We're not going to be able to do it in any one year. It's going to be slowly over time, but we do need to begin chipping away at that. Regardless, we are committed as a department to doing the most and the best with whatever resources that you allocate towards us. And I think with that, we've got our Public Works Management team, all of our managers who make all of this stuff happen, as well as the whole team back at their various offices. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Supervisor Wygant.
Ken, could you get for me, and I think I'd like to see every year, the pavement condition index, but could you give me that historical trending that I think you went back to 1990, was it?
Yeah. And we won't have necessarily every year because it doesn't keep it, but we do have points in time where we did publish it, and we will get that.
That's like, just the point being that I think it would help push us to make sure that we don't let the condition overall of our roads get too bad, because it would be an easy thing to do in a particular budget year. So just keep our feet to the fire better.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Supervisor Duran?
Yes, Ken, thank you and your staff for your great presentation. I've always had really good interaction with both you and your staff on the various projects that are taking place in District 1. Did have a question with regards to this $4.5 million for your road maintenance now, and I was just a little bit, just need a little bit of clarity here. Is the $4.5 million a year, is that just to maintain the level above dropping off the cliff? Is that, or how would you characterize that?
The $4.5 million allows us to do that 90 miles of seals every year and 10 miles of overlay. Now, in any given year, depending on the conditions of the road, sometimes we find our roads deteriorate a little quicker. It rains a lot more water. So you can't pinpoint an exact number, but I do believe that to be sustainable, that over the long term, that is adequate.
But that's the baseline, is what we need to do in order to stop from having to pay more.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Ken, I want to take the opportunity to thank you and your staff. I think your department really encapsulates a microcosm of the greater county, which is, even though we've seen a huge decline in revenue coming in to the county over years, and we've seen an incredible drop in the number of employees, we still have the same, if not more, service needs. The miles of road have not diminished since 2000. There are more of them and fewer employees and fewer dollars to take care of them. And I try to say it often, but I feel like I don't say it enough. You all just do, and again, you're standing in for the whole county here, so don't take it personally. You all do such an incredible job. And when we have, I know we all get them, constituent complaints, it's very hard to communicate to people this dichotomy that we're working with, which is needs have increased while dollars and staffing have decreased. And the fact that we continue to do as well as we have, and that we continue to plan for the future and to try to address those needs proactively, is just really incredible. And you guys just do a fantastic job. So on behalf of everybody at the county, thank you. But particularly to you guys, because as Kevin and Peter, I think, particularly know, they probably just hate seeing my number come up on their phones, but our job is to serve the public, and I think the Department of Public Works is truly the microcosm of how that works with constituents in the county. So thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, we're about 15 minutes early, so I would suggest that we move to the 5-year budget strategy update. See if we identify any open issues, and talk about any final budget adjustments, unless there's some objection by board members. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I might for just a moment, I understand it's going to take the IT folks just a couple of minutes actually to pull this one down and to load that presentation in, which includes the open issues that have come up and been discussed from yesterday and this morning. So if, that's occurring now. Okay. While that is occurring, I will have Ann distribute the updated materials for the binders related to the presentation we're about to go through, which includes those open issues.
Thank you.
Oh, that was quick.
The magic of technology.
Cool. When I'm at home, 2 minutes with my kids equals a half an hour, so this is 2 minutes equals 20 seconds. It's terrific. So over the course of yesterday and today, you've heard from us, and I guess the us is the broad us in terms of your county staff and departments, and the overview related to the budget and operations from our office relative to where we're at overall in terms of our fiscal health, what that tension is between the revenues and some of the cost pressures that exist in our budget today, and our sustainable approach to manage those as we transition through the next several years. So what's left is we'll go through the updated 5-year model. I'll do that relatively briefly, talk about what some of those open issues are for board direction and discussion, go through the final budget adjustments, that packet you have in your binders, and then move forward relative to whatever direction the board provides in terms of the budget. So since July 10th, we have updated the 5-year model to reflect a few different things, some of which came out of that discussion. The first is to reflect recommended budget changes from the proposed to the final budget, and some of those are the technical changes related to known revenue and expenditure changes as we have updated information following the completion of the 2011-12 fiscal year. There are also recommended one-time adjustments based upon department request, and in line with the 5-year strategy and the direction July 10th, the requests that are included in your packet fit into one of two categories. Either they are one-time requests to meet a critical priority within a department, and so don't impact the sustainability on a going forward basis, or have an outside fund source that is sustainable in order to support that activity on a going forward basis. So as much as possible, the recommendations that are before you in the packet are intended to be aligned with that 5-year approach from July 10th. The general fund contributions, as was the case July 10th, are maintained flat throughout the model over the projection period based upon what was in the proposed budget. And lastly, relative to changes, one of the things that has been discussed for the past year, and certainly as part of the July 10th discussion, was the increased reliance on carryover fund balance as a balancing tool for the budget during an economic downturn. And one of the places then to focus on as we move forward to greater levels of sustainability is decreasing that reliance on carryover fund balance. So what will be reflected in the next slide here in just a second is a decreased reliance on that carryover fund balance in the general fund based upon the movement towards greater levels of sustainability within the countywide operations. And so what that means, you can see here in terms of the update related to the model, there are two lines that are most relevant on this chart. The first is the top line related to the estimated fund balance carryover. That amount has decreased on a phased approach by about $1 million a year through the projection period beginning in 14-15 to move us to less reliance on one-time funding for ongoing operations and greater levels of sustainability within the countywide operations. The other line that's important to note here is the bottom line in terms of where that puts us for levels of balance within the general fund without any further actions being taken. And you'll see that there's some pluses and minuses there, but so it's not completely down to zero in a number of cases to say that there is still some work to be done related to implementing that 5-year sustainable strategy, but it does have a move us towards that less reliance on that fund balance. And specifically related to that, in terms of the one-time funding for ongoing operations, we have updated this to reflect the recommendations that are before you for final budget direction and that 5-year model. This is prior to adding dollars to the reserve in out years, for example, or spending more of the limited resources on one-time funding or one-time activities as we move forward. What it does reflect is the decreased reliance on that carryover fund balance and how that begins to move us towards a softer landing place for one-time funding for ongoing operations. So that's what you see here. Related to the 12-13 recommended spot on the chart that actually is linked to the decision packages that you'll see here in a couple of minutes as well, assuming that those would be, whatever those funds are, that they would be directed towards a one-time purpose. So that has been assumed in this chart, and we would make an adjustment to the extent that the final budget moves in any alternative direction. Turning to the Public Safety Fund, on the July 10th presentation, relative to the carryover fund balance estimate, we had already made that adjustment there to reflect the reality and the expectations relative to that fund on a going forward basis. So that's continued. The bottom line here is somewhat improved from what you saw July 10th, which is a function of the approach related to final budget request in terms of meeting that sustainability threshold and meeting those criteria related to one-time funding being used for the one-time related purposes, and to the extent that there are ongoing costs, that there's a alternative fund source that ensures that it doesn't have a significant impact on the sustainability of the fund. I should also note that departments, the public safety related departments, in crafting their final budget adjustments did propose, and we concurred with, setting some of their 11-12 excess carryover fund balance into the reserves instead of into operations, to ensure that there's some safety valve there and to move towards greater levels of sustainability. So that's all structured into the public safety model. The challenge, of course, remains. So it is somewhat improved from what was before you July 10th, but it does have an ongoing challenge related to revenues not pacing with some of the cost pressures that exist there, some of which, such as Measure F, are not a controllable cost, but still one that we have to meet nonetheless. When we look at this in a sort of a different, from a somewhat different perspective relative to the what we refer to as the lifesaver chart, down below you can see the trend line related to the revenue supporting the public safety fund, the general fund, public safety sales tax, and many of the other revenues, including grant revenues that are in those departments. Those three revenue pots add up to the total revenue line just below the top, and the top line that runs across there is the total expenditure line. And historically, and you can see this going all the way back to 2007-8, the gap between the expenditures and the revenues there has been covered with carryover fund balance from year to year. That's much like has been the case on the general fund side. The primary challenge related to sustainability is that that gap continues to grow, or begins to grow and continues growing as we move through the next several years. So the approach related to moving towards sustainability requires a vigilant focus and certainly some collaborative efforts to ensure that we can continue to make some progress to fund priorities of your board and of departments in a way that is within the available resources that are that we're expecting. And similar to the general fund, these are not static models, and so we will continue to adapt to what will be a changing reality related to federal and state funding, or more unfunded mandates, or the local revenue and expenditure picture as that changes over the coming months and years. So this is we love to say that this is exactly how things are going to play out relative to revenues and expenditures over the next several years, but we know that that is absolutely not the case. And what we do know is, based upon data today, what's happening in the economy today, our relationship with the state, and the discretionary revenue picture that we have here in the county for the general fund and for the public safety fund, this is a reasonable ballpark in terms of where we are headed to allow your board to make policy decisions and direction related to sustainability. And I'll pause just for a moment in case there are any questions related to the 5-year model before moving on.
I see none.
Okay. Discussion and direction. So the final budget adjustments and recommendations are included in your binder. I'm going to ask Ann to distribute one additional one. This is related to the assessment, the recently approved assessment appeals fee that impacts the clerk of the board's budget. That did not make it into the original packet. So this would be an additional request to budget the fee revenue that comes out of the board item that was approved and the associated position with that. There's not a general fund cost to it. It does have the sustainable revenue source to fund that activity related to the workload for the assessment appeals. So wanted to add that to the mix before we moved on. There are also a host of recommendations in the rest of the packet that span the departments, including what Ken just raised from a public works standpoint in terms of the 2 snow plowers. Those are in there, and the road maintenance funding from the road fund balance. Those are also included in there from a recommendation standpoint. So I would guess the best course of action would be to have a check-in with the board related to the final budget adjustments and the recommendations that are included in your binders. If there are specific questions, comments, concerns about any of those prior to moving forward.
Supervisor Holmes?
Are we at the appeals from departments position portion right now?
I'll get there in just a moment.
Oh, okay.
What specifically are you looking for right now, then? What am I missing here?
So typically, we request direction on these final budget adjustments as we move out of this workshop and into developing the final budget.
In addition to this, which final budget adjustments are you?
It would be those and the last tab within your binder related to the full summary of and detail related to the final budget requests. There are, as outlined in there by department, they're structured by department. All things that are recommended are, there's a description box. And
these are just the adjustments since our approval of the preliminary budget, but were incorporated in what was presented to our board as part of the department. Okay, fine.
That's correct.
Yeah, to clarify, they're all incorporated in the presentations we saw.
That's right.
Do you need a motion to approve the final adjustments, or we just want to move forward without objection?
Jerry, do you want just direction, or are we going to require a motion to approve the final budget adjustments? It just says direction.
I think direction is adequate because there'll be follow-up with the final budget that's being presented to the board.
Okay.
I have no objections to the final budget adjustments.
Let's start with, is there anyone who does have objections? Okay, I think you just got your direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There were a couple of other things that came up in the context of the workshops related to direction that are not quite final budget recommendations, they're not quite budget related, but rather priority related. And so we've highlighted these here just as a confirmation related to how we would proceed to move forward within the CEO's office. One of them referencing the Tahoe business model analysis and working through that from a staffing needs perspective and a kind of a broader operational model up in Tahoe. So working that through as one of the priorities as we go forward. Also, there was discussion about mandated versus non-mandated related programs and services, and trying to get a sense for what fits in which category, and we will be going through that analysis, building off of prior efforts to capture that information, and folding that into some of the efforts related to the performance measurement side. How do we measure where we're at? And one of the pieces to that is going to be the elements of our business that are mandated by the federal government or by the state, the Constitution, what have you. So understanding what those are, and if there's a level of service associated with that, and then those things that are non-mandated but may be a local priority, and just having some clarity about which fits in which box.
Thank you. I think that will be very useful to all of us. And to probably the individual departments, many of whom have taken on responsibilities and services over years that maybe the expectation is it's mandated, but upon review it may not be.
And there was some discussion yesterday about the uncertainty from the state and the evolving relationship between them and us, and things such as big realignments where we get some funded and some perhaps not as funded programs and responsibilities dumped on us from a requirement standpoint, trying to understand as that's changing, where are we today, so we have some barometer for how we are evolving and what that the evolution of our state-county relationship is over the coming years as well. Okay.
Just quickly.
Yes.
Madam Chair, could you provide a little clarification on what is meant by the Tahoe business model analysis? What does that mean?
Yesterday we talked, not at great deal, but we talked a little bit about understanding really what's going on in Tahoe. I mean, and I think Cedra is probably the most easy to identify example. How many permits are being processed up there versus staffing levels? What sort of revenue is generated? What are the county costs? Do we have appropriate staffing levels for the recognized needs up there? Understanding that just we may say, no, we don't have appropriate needs, and oh, we can't fund them. But just a better understanding of what our county services and facilities up there are providing versus what's coming out of the west end of the county. David, did you have anything to add to that?
I would just say that it really is just kind of a adjunct to some work that we're already doing up there. As we've occupied the Customs House and we've taken a look at how we're positioned to serve the community, we need to understand what the demands on staff are and whether we can fulfill those or need to somehow otherwise address in terms of streamlining procedures, providing sufficient shared staff support for both Cedra and the CEO's office up there. So it's really just kind of better assessing what the real demand is and how well we can meet that with available resources.
Supervisor Ullern, if I may add on there, that is not a budget request so much as just staff direction to look in that way. So
opportunity cost, perhaps, more than
that would be it.
Are you good, Kirk?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I was just curious what it was.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet.
Open issues.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Supervisor Duran.
Oh, okay, we're going to open issues.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to clarify as to whether or not we had addressed
Not quite there
Barry's
yet.
issue,
Not yet.
district attorney's issue, sheriff's issue. Thank you. Go ahead.
We're there. So from an open issues standpoint, first is the clerk of the board, one that I just referenced and was distributed to you that's more of a technical cleanup of the final budget requests that are already there, so you have that before you. The sheriff administrative services officer request actually doesn't require a board action, can be done within their existing budget. The department is working through exactly how they would move their positions around in order to accomplish that as a priority, and so we would continue to work with them on that.
And so both these issues are essentially revenue neutral.
Yes, that's correct.
And just for the board's benefit, we'd be happy to report back on the disposition of those issues with an information report, if that would be of value to you.
Yeah. Now appeals from departments, Jack.
So in addition to some of the open issues that have come up, there were a couple of appeals from departments that you heard yesterday, and they included county council, where there was a request that was in the $17,000 range. It covered a few different items related to some required HHS system support. There's a module associated with that, some materials and training. We first of all, we recognize the importance of the requests. This is a slimmer margin, historically operating department than most. We have had discussions with the county council since we broke yesterday, and believe that there are, given the salary of the vacant funded positions, that there are some available salary savings to fund these costs this year, but that we would continue to work with them relative to monitoring the budget and adjusting as needed as we transition into 13-14.
Is there also any opportunity, and perhaps Jerry is the one I should ask this question to, we did have some discussion yesterday about recouping some currently non-recouped costs. For example, the oversight board, I hate to say that because those are our dollars, but fair's fair. Yeah. Any possibility of, through recouping those costs, funding this?
Yeah, and actually we've talked with Jerry about just working with him in a number of areas where there may be opportunities to recoup some costs. It may or may not be the oversight board, given that we kind of take it from one pocket to the other.
Yeah.
But we do think we should capture those costs. So anyway, we did speak about.
Yeah, and with our system, we have documented the costs, so.
And that would also, I would assume, include the 8109.
Yes.
Whatever you're expending.
We think there's several areas in there that he can recoup some of his costs.
So, Graham, I'm not sure I understood what you said. So you're saying that you think this year there are savings that can be achieved within the existing proposed that will cover these?
Saving?
You're not asking for an additional $17,352 for this year?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That there would be savings or identified revenue, cost recovery options that would be, that could offset what these costs are over the course of 12-13.
Yeah, and based on my discussions with the CEO's office, I agree with that.
Okay, great. That just leaves us district attorney.
Okay, there were two requests relative to appeals from the district attorney's office yesterday. The first was a new request related to reclassifying make sure I get this right, a senior deputy district attorney to a supervising senior deputy district attorney, which would be a management level position within their office from an organizational perspective. We would certainly support the evaluation of the reclassification, which is done by the personnel department. They typically do the reclass studies, and so we would certainly support that moving forward. From a funding standpoint, to the extent that it's determined that that is an appropriate reclassification within their operational structure, we believe that there are sufficient salary savings within that budget in order to fund that cost. I think the difference is about $28,000 in terms of what's already reflected in their budget. And the second request related to, from the district attorney, was about funding to district attorney investigators. This request is in the $400,000 range. The implementation of the sustainable model related to public safety that we just talked about a couple of minutes ago does not include these ongoing costs, potential ongoing costs, and so we would propose that we would fold that into that analysis relative to levels of sustainability of a new ongoing cost. And in addition, there was a discussion yesterday related to a criminal justice system needs assessment, and it may make sense to fold the analysis of these two positions as part of that broader analysis of the criminal justice system here in Placer County.
Supervisor Duran?
I'd like to hear from Jeff what he thinks about that.
You get to work this.
Only once a year.
Chair Montgomery, members of the board, Mr. Bosch, Mr. Cardin, good morning. I'm here on behalf of Scott Owens, who you heard from in length yesterday about his request for these two positions. He regretfully is not in town today. He had a planned vacation and was not aware he was going to be asked for an encore performance. So you get me. So I just want to reiterate a lot of what Mr. Owens said, not in the detail that he did. I would like to comment on something that Supervisor Holmes said yesterday about the passion, and thanking Mr. Owens for the passion he had. Working with him closely and working with the individuals in the investigative unit, as I have, not just as their supervisor, but working with them on actual prosecutions of case, I know the origin of that passion. You see how hard they work, you see how top level they are in the performance they do, and you see on a day-to-day basis what they give to this community and our law enforcement, and the justice they give to the victims and the assistance they give to other law enforcement agencies in our county. A few years ago, as Mr. Owens told you, we lost two of those funding for two of those positions. We attempted to adapt to that in the time of the budget crisis, and as we always do with all our positions, we have an ongoing analysis of the needs in those areas. We are here before you asking something we rarely have done, certainly in this administration and the previous administration. We're asking you to refund those positions because based on our observations and what we know on a day-to-day basis, that unit desperately needs those two public safety positions and what they do. I'm not going to go over what Mr. Owens went over yesterday as far as the numbers. I think he did a fine job of telling you exactly what this group does. Our concern for the board, frankly, was that you were not aware of exactly what a DA investigator does on a day-to-day basis, the significant role they play in the criminal justice system, and the support they give the attorneys in our office. And the willingness of these individuals to take on additional assignments in the interest of public safety. I could keep you here all day and tell you what these individuals, Travares, the efforts and the time he's put to solve 20-year-old cases along with Detective Pollack of our Sheriff's Department, the assistance that they give other agencies in these homicide cases that can take them away from our office for months. Watching Scott Swanson sit in front of a computer and scan these computers to see if there's any online predators and to locate pornography, child pornography hidden on suspects' computer. He is the man in the county for that. He is your high-tech crime unit. He devotes his whole career to that. To watch Angela Ford, Christina Wu spend time interviewing children and investigating these child assaults, watching them stay after and come back because the child victim has just come forward to be there for that interview. And the day-to-day support, not from, like Mr. Owens says, from serving subpoenas to totally immersed in the investigation of a homicide case from beginning to end. I have personally spent weekends and nights sitting next to these individuals in police stations, working up these cases and offering and watching them perform. We run our office as efficiently as we can, and we never ask for anything we don't absolutely need. They need extra people. They are overworked. They worked hard. They work hard at what they do, and they're experts in it. They're at a minimum sergeant level kind of officers. They're the elite. They've been the elite everywhere they have been, and we are blessed to have them. But to some degree, you can only ask these people to cover so much and work so hard. We tried to perform the roles with less people. It is not working for us. They need extra staffing to do the job they need, and that's what we are asking this board to do. Again, I'm not going to reiterate what Mr. Owens said. He was quite lengthy because he wanted you to understand why he had the passion that he did. And I share it again because we see it every day. I know you're faced with tough decisions of where to allocate that money. We know that. We face sort of the same internal type decisions. Yours is much broader than ours. But when you look at
the bang for the buck, so to speak, of what you're getting and what you will get out of this, to be able to tell someone that after 20 years, we found your daughter's killer. We went back to New York and we found your child that had been abducted by your ex-husband, and now we're bringing him back. We've done that this year in Chicago specifically. To be able to do these things tells you the bang you will get for your buck. And all I think we need to do right now to achieve that is 2 public safety positions in our office to allow us to do that. And I promise you, Mr. Owens or myself will be able to come back to you and show you the value of that allocation of resources. So with that, on behalf of Mr. Owens, I thank you and respectfully request that you approve that additional funding, because I think you will find it is a great use of the taxpayers' money. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to address them.
I have a couple lights lit up, so don't go anywhere. Supervisor
I was hoping
Euler?
you wouldn't say that.
Not necessarily, well, maybe not really a question, but we are fortunate in Placer County in that, unlike other counties, we do have our public safety team working very well together. Yourselves, the sheriff, probation. More and more, you are viewed not just as a team, but almost as a single budget unit as well, when we start talking about the public safety fund and the public safety sales tax and all the rest. I have no doubt about the need for the positions, and I'm inclined to vote to support filling the positions. What I'd like to hear is from the sheriff's office and the probation office that they also are in support of this request. If they're not, doesn't mean I still don't support it, but given that team nature that we've built, and unfortunately the way that we have been forced to drive dollars kind of into public safety as one fund, I think we need to view this in the totality of that team and saying, okay, given the needs across the team, do we as the leaders of the team support these 2 positions being added to our team? So I'd like to hear from them before I cast the vote. Like I said, if one or the other or both stand up and say we don't necessarily think it's needed, doesn't mean that I won't support it anyway, but I'd just like to hear what they have to say.
I absolutely respect that, Supervisor Euler. I will not speak for them. I would anticipate they would be supportive. And the reason I say that is because of what you spoke about, not just as a financial budget team, but I've been impressed through my career here to watch how these agencies have grown together and use each other's resources and work as a team. So I hope they would be in support of that, and I respect that request and welcome it.
Supervisor Holmes?
Yes, District Attorney Owens did present a very compelling argument for these positions. It's been reinforced by you today, so I would support funding those 2 positions as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Holmes.
I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I think you guys do a tremendous job for the county and the people of Placer County, and any support that we can give you to make you that much more effective and efficient, I would support. I also am a little bit concerned, as Supervisor Euler is where this fits in the mix with regards to the overall budget, but I think we're all smart enough to be able to crunch our pencils, put those together to be able to find funding for this. So that's
Thank you.
I share everything that's been expressed here today. What I'm trying to come to really understand in my own mind is one of the things Scott said yesterday was a lot of these things the Sheriff's Department and some of our other public safety partners used to do, and we've taken them on, we being the District Attorney's Office, over time. So my question is kind of 2-part. Is there a way to get to a blended solution where some of those responsibilities go back to those agencies that used to do those pieces, understanding that they didn't do all of them and that, things grow exponentially? And between giving some of those responsibilities back to those partner agencies and maybe funding one position this year and working toward a second position next year, do you think that's a way to get you where you need to be, at least for an interim year, until we can have a sort of longer scale discussion about exactly what Supervisor Euler raised?
well, I can assure you that we'll welcomely accept any support the board gives us on that issue. I don't want to contradict Mr. Owens. Some of it is not that we have taken over what they have done. It's we require to augment what they do and support them in what they do. The best way to explain it to you that I know from what I do is the breadth of these investigations. A homicide, for example, that happens requires aggressive and quick investigation. Some homicides are very narrow in their focus because of their nature. Others are much more complex. We had one recently that spanned as far as South Africa. And then they have resource needs as well. We don't have the luxury trying to obtain these convictions and getting the justice for these defendants to say we just don't have the staff to make sure this case is done right. I cannot send a deputy DA to gain a conviction with one arm tied behind their back. The point I'm making is that if they need it, we have to do it. So if Roseville Police Department or Rockland or Lincoln or the Sheriff's Department has a need for 6 people to be involved in this investigation and they only have 4 to do it, and there's all these different responsibilities, we jump in to augment that. And the involvement can be huge. Like I said, one investigator was committed to one homicide for 3 months and did nothing else. I know what he did. He worked extra hours. It was not an 8 to 5, and he's still working on it. And it ultimately, what he did resulted in the arrest, and the case is now pending. But it's that it goes back to what Supervisor Euler said about the teamwork. Depending on the case, the role can change. Now, with the cold case is a great example of how we do work together, because if you have a Sheriff's Department's case, Mr. Tavares has worked closely with sheriff's detectives, and they together have gone to different locations in the country and gone together. And as a team, we formulate what you do this, we'll handle this, and together we come to our mutual objective. This is the way it works. It is a great team effort. We communicate well, share resources. So it's a little hard to bust up, Supervisor, I guess is what I'm telling you.
Well,
and there's so many variables to it.
And what I'm actually hearing you say actually kind of reinforces, I think, the first half of my suggestion, which is, since this is a team effort, are there other pieces of the team that can be pulled in at least for an interim period to support taking the strain off the district attorney's office? You know, as I say, and this is just a suggestion, I'm not bought into anything here, maybe funding one this year through county dollars and then working with those other partners, with our team, for them to take a little bit of the responsibility back to themselves. Just a suggestion. Holly?
Yes, Madam Chairman. You know, I certainly applaud the work the district attorney does, and to all of our benefit, those of us that live or work in Placer County and beyond, so it certainly is not, the recommendation is not any reflection of the good work that they do. And so it does become a bit of a cost issue for us, which is the true nature of our recommendation. One of the things that we might want to consider, should your board choose to move forward, is to look at some of the cost recovery options that might be available for some of the good work that the DA does do on behalf of our other jurisdictions. I think as part of that update of the Criminal Justice Master Plan, we may be able to explore some of those opportunities from a system-wide standpoint. So I think it is probably hard to get at the extent to which the DA has assumed additional responsibilities that previously had been a workload of the cities, but that may be the best place to explore it in any real detailed manner, because then you're looking at a broader system, and those would include some cost recovery options. And I don't know if Becky has anything to say, but just as a suggestion to this board, whatever you choose to do.
Becky, did you have anything to add?
No, nothing really to add other than...
Would you turn your microphone on, please?
Happy to do that, yes. Becky Riggin from the County Exec's Office. And again, as Holly said, our perspective was simply trying to bring in some of these collaborative reviews and have the There are a number of pending issues within public safety, so we thought, building on the work that's been done with our existing policy discussion frameworks of the Criminal Justice Policy Committee, the Community Corrections Partnership, and then also the plea group that gets together and discusses these things. So we thought we would identify these things from a systems perspective, do something of a rank ordering, review available funding, and then come back with something of a comprehensive package for your board to review that had been through the appropriate discussions with all the other players.
And would that be in advance of us adopting a final budget?
Well, that would not probably fit within that.
I mean, that's sort of the
Yes,
catch-22
that
we
is
find
the-
ourselves in right
yes,
now.
It is, yes.
So it sounds like the answer to my question is no, it would not be in advance.
I don't think we could do it in that timeline, no.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't actually expect that you could. I just wanted to be very clear. Supervisor Euler, your light is on.
Yeah, I appreciate the notion about looking for options to achieve cost recovery. But I look at this simply as a matter of right now for our board to make a decision in regard to spending priorities. And we just heard yesterday about the 143 new cases that have hit our probation department. Any violation of probation, in order for us to convict, requires these guys to go out and do their investigation to get that conviction, to re-incarcerate, and hopefully kick those folks back to the state to deal with at that point. We all know, we all have our eyes wide open to the fact that our role in criminal justice is only going to get bigger over the next few years. And what I'm hearing is that these guys are already impacted and it will get worse. And so from a budget priority standpoint, in terms of am I willing to spend more money on these two positions, the answer is yes. What I'm looking for is concurrence from the other two leaders of the team that they believe that those fairly scarce and limited resources that we are directing to public safety, this is a priority for them as well in looking at that entire system. So while I appreciate the efforts for cost recovery, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we should move forward with that. By the same token, I don't want us necessarily to hold up on this in that regard.
Right, and just so you know, I wasn't suggesting we hold up on it. I was suggesting that should your board choose to proceed, that we do look at some cost recovery options, and it wasn't, I wasn't trying to direct you any which way on that specifically.
If I may, I want just to add on a little bit as far as cost recovery goes. We attempt to get cost recovery for a lot of this, too. We do it through criminal defendants and their ill-gotten gains. As you all know, that when Sheriff Bonner hires a deputy sheriff, there's a lot of extra cost besides that body that goes with it. We have asset forfeiture money that we've gained through our investigator that's in the MAVMET unit. We've picked additional resources up for that. The problem with that helps us pay for his cars, her gun, the bulletproof vest, these kind of items, but we can't use it for direct personnel issues. So what we're asking for is actually the cost of the body. The rest of it we have where we are going to be able to use our asset forfeiture money to fund the other costs of having these additional DA investigators on as well. So we've only asked for the very narrow thing we need from this board, and that's the two positions refunded. So again, thank you, Supervisor, for your comments.
Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Supervisor Euler was saying with regards to the impact. Being a former DAG with the Department of Justice, representing the Department of Corrections, I'm very familiar with this type of clientele. And we're not just talking the bed expense, we're not talking the investigative expense. There are a lot of other things that are going to be coming down the pike, medical claims, all kinds of different things that I'm not going to go into because I don't want to tip anybody off on that. But this is going to get extremely expensive. All right, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So, like I said, it looks like we're going to be taking lunch. If you can get that information over to us, or those requests from probation and the sheriff's office, we can at least have a little bit more deeper discussion about this. But that, I too don't want to wait as well. If you
would you like me to start on that right now?
If you can do that,
Yeah.
and
Always offer.
Yeah, if it would please the board, we do have an item, like a placeholder item for the Tuesday's agenda for any follow-up items, and maybe that would be an appropriate time to bring it back if it's not too far out.
That's fine.
Madam Chair, I'm going to put on my technical budget geek hat here for just a second related to this. Should the board provide direction to fold this in, there are 3 different ways to do it, so I regret that makes this a little more complicated. But so there's this straight up way to do it relative to a general fund augmentation, using existing vacant funded positions within the department's budget, or using some portion of the public safety reserve that was set aside as part of the final budget adjustment process. Now, that would clearly be a one-time fund source for this ongoing cost, but just wanted to make sure there was awareness of the 3 different ways that you could move forward related to the direction.
And again, we could get to that specific resolution on Tuesday when we revisit it. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you did really, really well in your courtroom presentation class.
Be sure to tell Mr. Owens that.
I will.
Just show him the video.
Yeah.
I'm not sure from the back they can tell the difference if it's me.
Okay. So we are actually almost to the end. Relative to where we're at in the 12-13 budget process, what is before you here is a couple of options related to. Yes.
Quick question. Might save us a little time. The decision package number 1, the deferred one-time infrastructure priorities, is that the Public Works road overlay plus the 2 pieces of machinery?
The specific projects behind that actually have not been identified. There's an infrastructure budget where these dollars would go and could be distributed as prioritized by the board or could be brought back.
Help me understand, because we got a fairly precise number there down to the single-digit dollar amount. So obviously somebody added something up to say deferred one-time infrastructure priorities are.
So let me provide some clarification. Okay. As the guy that did the math, I'll provide some clarification. When we had the discussion relative to the 5-year budget strategy in July, one of the things that was included in that for the general fund was that increased revenues and excess carryover fund balance beyond what was needed to balance the budget, half of that would be directed to the general fund reserve. Mm-hmm. And that's the first number. The residual in the first decision package just goes to infrastructure. So it's just the difference between what's available and the calculation of what would be set aside related to the general fund reserve.
Okay, because it's not exactly half. So
it's not exactly half because there are a number of other things that are going on in the budget that move things up and down. There are costs that have been added in, such as a $400,000 cost due to a CalPERS Medicare Part D that's been pulled out. This only reflects the carryover fund, half the general fund portion reflects the carryover fund balance beyond what was in the proposed budget, so that's $3.5 million, plus the increase in discretionary revenues, which are related to sales tax, and that's a relatively small number. It's a couple $100,000. So that calculation was made just for the general fund reserve. There is some, it ends up being not quite half in terms of a 50-50 split because of the number of other things that are going on to balance the budget.
And if I could just add in here, actually at that same meeting in July, the board directed that we form an infrastructure committee that would delineate where our investments should be prioritized and bring back a recommendation to your board, as well as a financing plan. Mm-hmm. We see those dollars as part of that planning process in terms of the priorities that would come back to your board. I think we've discussed a number of times the need to do a little bit of rebalancing in terms of infrastructure investment and ongoing operations. So this is that piece of the set-aside that was discussed. It would come back to your board as part of our ongoing infrastructure planning process and for your board to make that designation and prioritize.
Okay, so then let me, if I may, just perhaps clarify my question. In what is being recommended in the 12-13 Public Works budget, net budget of $145.5 million, does that include the utilization of the fund balance carryover for the $600,000 for the snow blower and the additional $1.2 million, or whatever, I think I heard 1.3 million
Right.
for the road overlay?
That's-
That is contained already within that?
That's correct.
Okay. So then, when we're talking about making a decision between adding to general fund reserves or splitting it between general fund reserves and one-time infrastructure priorities, that's already covered and off the table. Now we're looking at the opportunity to get into additional infrastructure priorities. So this, what you're asking is simply from a, for lack of a better term, simply from a parking the money standpoint. We're still parking $4.2 million because you have not identified where that 2.1 would be spent today.
The specific project, you're correct.
You have not, right?
That's
Okay.
correct.
So it's just then a function of, we're going to park 4.2. Are we going to do it all in general fund reserves? We're going to split it between, roughly split it, between general fund reserves and this infrastructure, this account that will hold money for infrastructure priorities to be named.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fair. Okay. And the reason that we would do that is simply the board making a statement affirmatively that we are committing this money to one-time fixes on our infrastructure and keeping it separate from other demands that might pull from a general fund reserve.
Absolutely, and it's
Okay.
consistent with the strategic financial plan you
Okay.
put in
I-
place.
That's all I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out. Was-
Okay,
was-
you've got it.
Is that money spoken for, or is this more semantically the board taking a policy decision and implementing it by setting the dollars aside
This
now?
is
Okay.
Right within your
Thank you.
policy framework.
All right.
Both packages have the same amount of money, we're just
Yeah.
allocating.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
And that's all I was trying to figure out is, are those dollars already spent or not? That was really what it boiled down to.
And Supervisor Duran, to your point, both packages do have the same amount of funding, and both packages meet the sustainability criteria related to dedicated towards one-time purposes, whether it's a set-aside in the general fund reserve to move us closer to that minimum 5% threshold, or towards infrastructure to meet some of those deferred priorities from the past several years.
Any other comments on this?
Madam Chair, my preference is for decision package number one. I don't know if you want it in the form of a motion. I'm happy to do that.
I think we're just looking for the sense of the board right now.
Okay.
Supervisor Wygant?
Nodding heads.
Okay. Did you get a sense there?
I think we got
Okay.
five.
A lot of head shaking.
Looks like 5 nods.
Yeah, okay.
It looked like 5 knots.
All right then, I think our last slide.
So how we would proceed is to incorporate the board direction from the final budget recommendations, the other open issues that we worked through, including a district attorney request, and the related, and the final direction related to the general fund reserve and the set-aside related to infrastructure. We will pull all that detail together. We will make that publicly available as of, I believe, next Friday. So we'll be doing a lot of hustling to pull the rest of that together and then come back to your board for the public hearing on the final budget September 11th, and then a couple of weeks later come back for final adoption.
And the one interim step on there is on Tuesday. We
On
will
Tuesday.
revisit okay. Everybody on board?
All souls clear.
Any other questions or comments before I use the gavel? Holly?
Yes, I would just like to thank our board for the hard work and your time and attention, and frankly, for putting in some really sound policies, both our financial policies and the most recent strategy that you adopted. We think it serves us well as a county. I think it serves our citizens well, and so I just want you to know, from a staff standpoint, how much we appreciate that, because it does help us have an optimistic view of how we can manage our dollars as we go forward.
Supervisor Euler?
I appreciate that, Holly. I wanted to say that, once again, our staff, I think, has done a phenomenal job in the CEO's office, working with the departments. I do hear from department heads, and I will say that this year there was much less consternation than there has been in years past. with interaction with the CEO's office. And to that end, I want to thank you. I also want to thank our new CEO, David, for the way that he has aggressively engaged with all the departments. I have heard back from department heads, the electeds included, very pleased with the way that you have engaged them in this process and coming at them with a good spirit of cooperation. I should say coming to them, not at them, to them with a good spirit of cooperation and an acknowledgement that they have constituents they have to serve as well. And that is being noticed and is appreciated by those out there. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Any other accolades before I use the gavel? All right.
I was just going to say that I appreciate everything that you do. I thought this process went exceedingly smooth, and I, for one, have a lot less brain damage. This being my second time around, things are a little bit more clear than they were for me last year. So.
And on that note, we stand adjourned at 12:45.